Hey, players, this is Morgan, part of Murph and Morgan. This is a special episode, episode 50. We're going to recap our first 49 episodes. We're going to take a little time. The first half of that will be just talking about that. Some of the guests we've had, in fact, all of the guests we've had, their stories, what made them special. And then we're going to get into the second half with JP. Javier Pena joins us again, our senior agent in residence, to talk about Pablos Hippos. So there won't be an outro on this. We're just going to stream this all together, and hopefully you guys will enjoy it. Give us your feedback, and we just want to tell you we appreciate so much the opportunity to bring you the original, the untold stories that now constitute the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the Game of Crimes. I know you all were expecting our traditional intro music, our Game of Crimes, but man, this was Pablo one, so we had to use our Narcos, semi-Narcos introduction music to this one, because this one is going to be fun. This one is about, well, Pablos Hippos, but we'll get into that in a minute. I am Morgan Wright, your host for this next hour, and technically, Steve only gets to host the first half of this. The second half, you're a guest, dude. You're one of our player guests. So welcome to the podcast, Morgan Wright. I'm here literally with my partner in crime,
Steve Murphy, and everybody calls me Murph. This is a good one. This is a real good one.
We're going to have some fun. So we're going to riff on this for a little bit towards the end. But as we always do, let's get started with just a tad bit of housekeeping and go over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. It's 5. 5 is an easy number to remember. Just go hit those stars. Let us know what you think. Drop us some comments. Also, head on over to our website, gameofcrimespodcast.com. You're going to want to see the pictures for episode 50s. Murph is loading up the drive with pictures of everything from rhinos to hippos to you name it. I mean, we've got everything. This is like a zoo. This is like the National Zoo in Colombia, right? So head on over there, our mailing list, merch and stuff. Follow us on social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, at Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook, and the Instagram. But where you got to be, you got to be on Patreon. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We just released our case of the month where Murph and I analyze from a different angle the escape and manhunt for Vicky and Casey White, not married, just happen to have the same last name. And we talk about some things, our perspective about this. And in fact, Murph doesn't even know this. I dropped a little bit of an episode out there just as a teaser for people to hear what our thoughts are about it. So you guys will hear a teaser episode out there. But if you want to hear the whole thing, go to patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We have a ton of content. I mean, we've found that you can't make this shit up has been popular with people. We even got a couple emails, Murph, people going, I love stupid criminals. So do we.
Yeah, in this latest episode about the whites, as you know, if you're a regular listener, we don't hold back. If a person in public trusts violates their oath, we don't hold back on them. So you'll hear our real opinions about it.
Yeah, and we have some improvements for how to improve security in the jail. Like, don't let fucking murderers walk out with just one, a jailer, one deputy accompanying them. That might be a start there. Anybody who's on trial, for murder and is serving 75 years already for attempted murder and home invasions, maybe I'd have a couple big guys escorting the big guy around. So anyway.
Yeah, might be a little incentive there for him to escape.
Yep. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes. Also, PayPal.com .me/Game of Crimes, or use our email at paypal.com, gameofcrimespodcast@gmail.com, whatever makes it easier for you to support the show. Just throw one over the fence if you feel like it. But before we get started, a quick disclaimer. This is a show about crime. We talk about bad people doing bad things and bad people doing bad things to good people. We do take the story seriously, but
we never take ourselves too serious.
And how do we prove we don't take ourselves serious, Murph?
Oh, there's a lot of self-deprecation going on here.
Well, the fact that I'm on the podcast with you shows that I don't take myself seriously either. So
yeah, where's your Tommy Bahama shirt today, there, big boy?
This is Tommy Bahama shirt.
Oh, I should have known that pink or that fuchsia, whatever that is, that gives you.
Hey, man, rock it if you got it. So, and speaking of rocking it if you got it, guess what time it is, Murph?
What time is it?
It's time for Small Town Police Blotter. All right. Hey, now, this first story technically is not from a small town. It's from Texas. It's from Abilene, Texas, but it comes from Steve King off of our Patreon page. But it's not so much the story. It's that you'll hear the end of it. So an Abilene man has been accused of walking on the wrong side of the road. Now you're going, who cares about that?
Yeah.
Well, According to an arrest report, Abilene police responded to a disturbance call in which they witnessed John Davis of Abilene walking on the right side of the roadway instead of the left, in which oncoming traffic was coming from behind. So, my first thought, there's one more sentence to this, but my first thought is, why would you do that? Well, Murph, I just thought, my thought is, you remember those calls where you went to where they piss you off and there's nothing else you can do about it, but the minute they can commit a traffic violation, or a little, traffic infraction, it's like, yeah, okay, I can get you for this. I think that's what it is here. Now, what does it say about your state of life when you are being held in the Taylor County Jail on a bond of $94 and you can't bond out?
How did they come up with why not a 50 or 100, a round number, $94.12 you can get out.
I'm afraid that if you can't afford $94 to get out of jail, it might be time to quit being involved in disturbance calls. But anyway, hey, this next one also comes from another fan. It comes from our Game of Crimes fan group, not the page. We have a page and we have a group. This is our super secret squirrel group run by our famous, fabulous mafia queen, Sandy Salvato.
Love Sandy.
Anyway, so this comes from Pikeville, Kentucky, population 7,202.
Salute.
So Lewis Ratliff sends us this from our Game of Crimes fan group. A Pikeville man was taken to jail Tuesday after a state trooper pulled him over and found him completely naked. Now, Murph, I'm going to let you guess.
What time of day was it? Does it say?
It was nighttime. Yeah. So, do you think this guy was sober?
Now, I'm going to guess that. Was he doing meth? Because you know what we say.
Well, it might be. Hang on. So, police had been called about a naked man walking around his truck near the Pike County Airport. When officers went to check it, they saw the man swerving as he drove away. Of course, the trooper pulled over the man, identified as 41-year-old Wesley Dean Lawson, and found him in the car naked, trying to stretch a shirt over himself as the officer approached the car. Lawson explained that he was naked because he had been having sex with the woman and she must have taken his pants. But the police were unable to locate any woman. But Steve, to your point, guess what they spotted on his nose? Powder residue.
Oh, okay.
And he failed.
I didn't want to touch that one.
And he failed a subsequent field sobriety test. So, shock of shocks, he was arrested for DUI and indecent exposure. Now, I do have one just quick bone to pick with this. He was not indecently exposed until the trooper made him get out of the car. It's like Ron White, the comedian, said one time. He says, I wasn't drunk in public. I was drunk in private. They threw me into public.
That's true. That's true.
All right, Murph. Now, the one thing, too, about getting married, one of the things that makes marriage work, right, is having common interests, common bonds. You want it to be different, but you got to share something in common, right?
Yeah.
So I want to announce the marriage of Cole Ray Hogner, 21, of Tahlequah, and Raina K. Eagle, 18, also of Tahlequah. They were just recently married. And then in the same section of the paper, under felonies, Cole Hogner was charged with possession of a credit card belonging to another, and under misdemeanors, Raina K. Engel was charged with unauthorized use of a credit card. I mean, the family that steals together stays together.
Keep it in the family, buddy.
Keep it in the family.
All right. What a wonderful couple. That's like Bonnie and Clyde to a lesser degree.
I wouldn't give him. They weren't. They're not the high IQ version of Bonnie and Clyde. So.
Jeez.
Well.
All right.
So we kind of blazed through that because we wanted to spend a little time kind of setting this next part up, because this is going to be fun. We had talked about what we kind of, this is our 50th episode, guys. So first of all, we want to thank everybody for hanging in with us. We think we've done reasonably well in terms of downloads and, how we've grown the audience and everything. And your comments really help us out. And we just thought, hey, we would kind of bring back somebody who was on episode 1, and that's our senior agent in residence. That's Javier Pena. And we would talk about something a lot of people don't know about. I mean, some people have heard about it. They've done a couple specials on it, because Murph, you were on one of the specials, Animal Planet.
Yeah, we both were.
Yeah. No, we weren't. You and JP were. I wasn't on that special.
That's what I meant.
That's not what you said. Yeah, okay. But it's Pablos Hippos, and everybody thinks at first, oh, that's cute, because if you watch, I think it's episode 5 of season 1, I think, of Narcos Mexico or whatever. That's when Pablo. So Narcos Mexico goes back and shows the rise of Pablo too, in addition to the other parts of the cartel. And this obviously was about Kiki Camarena. But it shows the scene where Pablo, you look over there and there's Wagner Mora playing Pablo, but there's one of his hippos there.
Mm-hmm.
And so people think that these hippos are just, oh, they're cute. We see them in the zoos. You know, you watch them on Animal Planet or you see some National Geographic special. But, you know, hippos were never, ever intended to be in South America. They can't
And
swim that far, for one thing.
and they're not intended to be pets. These
Oh,
are some of
no.
the most dangerous, most aggressive animals out there. They're not meat eaters, which you're going to find out. I'm sorry to give that little tidbit away, but they are territorial. They're very protective of their young, and they don't like to be screwed with.
No, they don't. So, hey, but you know, kind of a quick retrospective before we get into this, because this is our 50th episode. And, you know, Steve, it got me thinking. We started going back over some of the people that we've talked to. And I think it's just amazing. I mean, we have mixed stories in between of people, famous stories, things you've heard about, things you've never heard about before. But when you hear the story, you're going, oh my God, how just how fantastic is that? And so, you know, I was just looking back, and of course, well, obviously, we kicked off with you and JP, season one, or I mean, episode one, and we did a 2 hour thing. And obviously, on Patreon, we go in
Hmm.
depth, 12
Hmm.
episodes, and we find out stuff nobody know. You guys don't even talk about in your worldwide tour
That's right.
and your show. But you know what else? We're going to find out something in episode 50 I've never heard before, and it's Finca Napoles, and only JP would be the one to find us. That's all I can say. If there's anybody to find it, it's JP.
It's only appropriate that he brought this up. It just would not have the same impact if I had mentioned it.
Oh God, no! And if you want to know what it is, stay tuned.
That's
I think it's
right.
about halfway through the episode. We'll
Uh,
see. But I got to looking at it, and then you know what? I think we got the last interview with George Young, Pablo's business partner,
yes,
before he passed away. So I think
we
that was
did.
the last podcast interview. And then, you know, we had some great people like Pam Barnum. I mean, kick ass Canadian cop. Anybody who dives out of a car at 25 miles an hour before she gets whacked, you know, by the Hells Angels,
Hmm.
got to vote in my book.
Or doesn't smack her partner for puking in her hair. Ugh,
Yes.
that's nasty.
And then you know what? One of our first two-part episode was Lou Velosi, and that was I tell you the other thing too we were very grateful about too is we talked about Lou. He had been trying to get his book published. He had talked to you, and then
Hmm.
miraculously he appears on this. How many offers did he say he got? I can't remember, like
No
10 or
less
12.
than 10 was his wording. No less than 10 offers from producers to do something with his story.
And not only did they go on to do something with the story, his book is published, Storefront, you know, about the undercover operations he did as an ATF agent. But they've also turned this into a little documentary. They've put it out at a
Hmm.
couple film festivals, and we will be seeing Lou at the Southern California Gang Conference.
Yep. And this hasn't been published anywhere. So if you're listening to us, you're getting exclusive here. You'll get the first hear on this. Javier and I are actually working with him and our talent agent and a production company on a potential new TV series. So we don't have contracts yet, but just to tease you a little bit, that this is how the brotherhood of law enforcement comes together and looks out for each other. So we'll see what happens with this.
Well, that's news to me too, pal. Thanks.
I thought I told you about it.
You tell me a lot of things. I mean, like
I, I
what you
only
had
tell
for
people.
dinner.
I only tell people what that need to know. Sorry.
Need to know. I get it. Need to know, right to know. Okay, we've been down that road. Then we
Uh,
went on to Kevin Stevens, your partner,
oh
and
yeah,
what a great story. And you know, the thing about that was you and him had never talked about that story for what, like 18 years, 20 years.
yeah. That happened in 1989, and we had. It's hard. I couldn't even believe it when I realized it that we never compared notes. We never discussed it with each other than his health. How you doing now? What can I do to help you out here, and that kind of thing. But it was amazing to hear the different ways that we remember things that happened that day. So it's pretty neat.
Yeah, and time, you know, it's one of those things too. Is like that's something that could have ruined Kevin's life, but he came back from it. He learned to shoot differently.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, this is somebody who should never have come back to work, but he did. You know, he could have gone on disability, but no, the dude rocked it and came back. Then we
Well,
moved on. Go
well,
ahead.
we've had a lot of guests that have been
Oh yeah.
shot and wounded in the line of duty, and every story is amazing to listen to. The perseverance, the will to live, how they didn't let the bad guys get them down, and it was the same thing with Kevin. Man, there's no way he was going to let those guys defeat him.
Well, he was pissed. The most dangerous thing that happened to Kevin was you had to post guards at the hospital because he had two different girlfriends,
It was,
and
and
never
that's
the
true.
twain shall meet. So then we moved on to and look, folks, some of the folks we talked to, they have made big movies about. So Jeff Moore
Mhm.
was basic Bradley Cooper played him, not his exact name, but played him in the movie The Mule about Leo Sharp, the Sinaloa cartel's oldest trafficker. And what a great humble guy that was. Just a nice, soft spoken, and I loved his self deprecating humor because he talked about, yeah, we seized I think it was like 15 kilos of cocaine. He said, that's it. We've put an end to drug trafficking in Detroit. It is over.
Hey, and if you remember too, we posted the pictures of him. We got a lot of positive comments from the lady listeners out there.
Well, him and Lou too. Yeah, put up some more of those hunks up there. The eye
Yeah,
candy.
yeah, true.
But well, what a great guy too. And then I'll tell you, this is a buddy of mine, and what a story he had. Mike Neal about the two West Memphis officers that were killed by the two sovereign citizens, and the shootout he got into. And Steve, to this day, I'm surprised they haven't made a movie about that or done a book about that. And I've talked to Mike about that. I said, man, you gotta make a movie, got to make a book.
Yeah.
This is something that just screams for telling the story, the kind of heroism, knowing that, hey, you're running your car into them at 50, 60 miles an hour, you're shooting through your windshield. These guys have just shot and killed two officers. They've shot and wounded two more. And
Yep.
now you're in the middle of a Walmart parking lot. I mean, what a story.
And it was all on videotape. That's the cool, well, to us, it's a cool thing. To a lot of people, you don't want to watch that, but you could see exactly what happened that day.
Yeah, man. So that was stuff too. And then we launched Patreon on August 1st. So that's when we did our official launch. And then we got into, Steven, I just sent you an email this morning. We got an email from one of our players. I won't
Mhm.
use her name because I didn't ask her if we could, but she just sent an email, said, hey, I heard of you because of James and Jimmy, of Small
Mhm.
Town Murders, where we launched with. And then she says she was watching this documentary, and there's this guy named Andrew Hogan who's talking about capturing El Chapo. And I'm going, well, okay, so that was the first capture, and it didn't stick because he escaped. So the real story, if you want to hear the real story, that was episode 9. Paul Crane and Abe Perez. These guys are the real deal. And just like you and JP did, and you talked about, they gave credit to the real heroes there. And those were the Mexican Marines. Those were the guys who
Right.
were the tip of the spear that were out engaging every single day, going after the most dangerous people. And I'll tell you, part of that episode too still pisses me off to today. I know he tries to be in the middle of everything, but fucking Sean Penn ruined the
Yeah.
operation.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, they had to postpone everything because of him, and he probably doesn't even know it. But that's the idea of it. You're in there, you're screwing up things, costing people their lives because you think that you're self-important and can get involved and solve a problem that nobody else can solve. I mean, you gotta know what lane you're in. You're a freaking actor. You pretend to be somebody else.
You read
Stay in that
lines written
lane.
by somebody else to pretend to be somebody you're not. And
Yeah.
I always, like I said, this is my one pet peeve, but you get all of these people who have certain social issues they're against, but yet they will take money to play actors who represent the polar opposite of what they believe. If you really believe what you believe, then
Mhm.
don't take the money and don't do the acting. But I digress. Let's not get too off of
Right.
pointy. But you talk about a hell of an episode, and Paul Crane, when they start talking about the shootout they got into and the helicopters that were there and the trucks, I mean, I thought I was watching a recap of World War II, the storming the beaches at
I know.
Normandy, man.
Well, and just back to Hogan, I mean, there actually was a DEA agent involved in the actual capture with the Mexican Marines when they got Chapo, but he's still on the job. He's humble. Javier and I have actually spoken to him personally and gotten firsthand account of what really happened that day. And hopefully, he's still got a number of years to go before he retires. But when he retires, and hopefully, Game of Crimes will still be going, then and we'll bring him on the show and you'll hear from him. But that's years down the road.
Yeah, and he didn't punch out to go grab a little bit of glory and write a book to claim credit for
Right.
doing everything, right?
Absolutely.
We could do a whole episode on that. But anyway, we're just kind of recapping. And then a great one too. We always wanted to, one of the things compliments we've gotten from people, and we're proud of it too, is we showcase everybody. Look, our belief is if you wear the badge, we don't care what race, color, sex, gender, orientation, it doesn't matter to us. If you wear the badge
Right.
and you bleed blue, you got a spot on this show to tell your story. And Michelle Linhart was a fabulous story. Had she not poofed her hair to reach 5'4", this story may have never happened.
Hey, if she hadn't poofed her hair, Javier and I I wouldn't have been promoted to the SES ranks of DEA because she's the one that bumped me up there. You hear in the mafia when they become a member of the mafia, they become a made man or a made. Well, they don't make women, but a made man. That's what we say in DEA. Michelle's the one responsible for making me in DEA.
Yeah, brings you in for the ceremony in velour jumpsuits in a hotel room that we'll talk about later with Steve Metelsky, but that's a little bit farther down the line. So Michelle
Mm.
Linhart, and then two of my other buddies that I'd worked with way in the past, Alan Thomas and Graham Burridge, were with New Scotland Yard, the Counterterrorism Command, SO 15. And we talked with him. I love talking to the British, and now Graham is Welsh, but he's got such a great sense of humor. And Alan, they talk about that day. Alan was there when Lord Mountbatten was killed by the IRA, blown up in his boat. They talk about how many bombings they'd respond to, and then we talk about the 7705 train bombings.
Mhm.
And just his knowledge of that and what him and Graham had to do and how important at that time phones and computer were and the amount of time they spent going through CCTV recordings looking for these bombers, only to find out that guess what? They thought that they were done with this. They had to stop another plot 2 weeks later that fortunately because of bad
Mhm.
engineering didn't work. So I mean, what a great group of guys.
And that's the thing. We're trying to take this international as well as national. I'm just looking at our statistics here. 17% of our listeners are international. So that's why we try to bring in law enforcement from other parts of the world here.
Yeah, and look, Australia, you gotta bump it up. You're doing good. I think you're ahead of Canada now.
They are. They are. And the Canadians were trying to bump it up higher because they were number 2. Now they're number 4.
Yeah, hey, you're falling down on the job there, eh? Well, we're gonna have to get Steve and Pam and a bunch of guys up there, and one of our other guys we'll talk about here in a minute. But then we go from proper British accents. The Dominic Polifrone, who dropped an F bomb every third word. But man, anybody who can take down Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman,
Oh,
and just hear his story, and not only that, but see, I think one of the things we do here that nobody else does. A lot of people just want to hear the story. Just give me the meat of the sandwich, and nobody understands. We got to set context.
right.
Learning about, I had no idea Dominic Polifrone played football in Nebraska.
Yeah. With that
Of all,
accent.
hey, how you guys doing? What'd you say there, son?
You ain't from around here, are you, boy?
Yeah. You sure got a purty mouth, though.
But you know what? If somebody was going to be called Iceman in that, it should have been Dominic because he's got ice in his veins to go work undercover against those type of mass murderers out there. Holy cow.
Well, and the way he was using, the way he was using poisons and everything else to do stuff, just squirt it on things and, you
Mhm.
know, blow it in people's faces. It's like nobody was looking for this stuff. So it's
Right.
like he was so concerned. But yeah, but he also worked across the whole mafia family, took down, I think, 50, 60 people, worked across all 5 families. I mean, again, you sit back and you want to salute guys like this for having cojones of stone to do
You're
stuff
not
like
kidding.
this.
You're not kidding.
And then this was a very emotional episode for a couple reasons. We had Dave Reichert on. He was the lead investigator for the Green River Killer, that piece of shit,
Yeah.
who killed. Well, now it's up to I think 51 that they've confirmed that he's killed, and he's saying
Mhm.
that he killed more than that. But um, Dave, when you do the research, Dave got hate mail from people and stuff, and it's like, Steve, you guys get hate mail. And
Right.
you and JP, unbelievably, you guys get hate mail. I don't know why anybody would hate the fact is that you took down a mass, murdering a narco terrorist. But there are some people out there who have this fantasy.
Yep.
But let me tell you, but somebody who did this basically it took him 20 years, 20 years, starting as a detective, working his way up. And then going to run for sheriff, and then as he became sheriff, he was able to reinvigorate the investigation, and a little bit of DNA, a little bit of luck from when they took a swab from this guy early on. I don't want to say names of these pieces of shit either. I don't give them any airtime. So he's
Right.
piece of shit. Um,
Absolutely.
it was that swab that led to the DNA, and just to hear his story. And then we did a Facebook Live with him too, and I thought that was just and another humble guy who's very family oriented and just believes in what he's doing, just a true patriot.
Absolutely. And he was, if I'm not mistaken, he was our longest interview, right? I mean, that was
Oh,
so in depth, and his career afterwards is just unbelievable. It's an episode. If you're into serial murders, you need to listen to that episode.
and you know what? And that's another hallmark of what we do. We talk to the people who actually did the case, not people who read about it. There's
Right.
people who read the book and people who wrote the book. And many of our guests also have written books, and we have those all on our webpage, Game of Crimes. And then we get into one of our first legitimate bad guys. Dominic could have been a bad guy, but fortunately he was a good guy, but he played a good bad guy. But our first true, person who operated on the other side of the law was Ken Ryjock, the laundryman.
Well, that was after George Jung. He was our first, and
Oh,
then we
that's
brought
true
Ken
too.
in.
Yeah. Well, he's the first one that's still alive after we interviewed him.
True. Hey, not that we had anything to do with that. Rest
We
in
didn't
peace,
have-
George.
Yeah. That's true. I
Whew.
forgot about, yeah, but Ken Ryjock. And you hear about, again, it's all about context. Here's a guy who went to the dark side, started laundering money for drug traffickers and everything else. But the guy was a Vietnam veteran, served our country, was in combat, served, with distinction and honor, and yet through a series of circumstances, getting access to drugs, cocaine, things like that, started his downward spiral. But then, guess what?
Mhm.
It's like Star Wars. It's the hero's journey. It's a story of redemption. Ken comes back, and now he's working with law enforcement, working with countries and companies to show them how to detect laundry or money laundering and fraud and things like that. So now he's serving the public instead of stiffing the public.
Right. It was so interesting too because this was in the infancy stages of cocaine exploding in the United States, and to hear how simple it was. You just put money in a bag, fly down to the islands, open up a bank account, make some connections, fly back. Pretty
Those were the
simple.
good old days.
If you're a money launderer or a drug trafficker.
That's right. And then this was interesting too because we're represented by United Talent Agents, and so is this next guy. And they reached out to us. He is well known, internationally well known. Wrote a book, and he wanted to come on our podcast to talk about it. And we actually did his launch party for his book. We talked about his book, and then it launched the next day. But it's James Murray. You guys might know him as the star of Impractical Jokers
Yep.
and the movie too, as well. And his book was, I mean, again, one of those things you read that, and it's like there's a couple moments in there you go, motherfucker. Why did you do that? And so it was good. We had a good time with Murray. He had a good sense of humor too, as you would expect from a comedian.
He did, and that book, I tell you, because I'm not going to tell you much about the book, but there were a couple times when I had to put it down because it was infuriating what was going on. But it's a great suspenseful book. Take a look at it.
It is. And then another friend of mine, we got to talk again. We talk about the real deal, the Boston Marathon bombing. Ed Davis was the commissioner of the Boston Police when that went on. They made Patriots Day about it. Mark Wahlberg, John Goodman, played Ed Davis in that. Although I thought John Goodman's Boston accent sucked. Mark Wahlberg was the one who had the real. I mean, he's from that area. He had the real Boston accent. He played. It was so authentic, and that was actually one of our live stream reviews on Patreon. Was Patriots Day.
Yep. Great movie. Great movie. I actually really like Mark Wahlberg as an actor. I think he does a fantastic job, and what he does in his private life to support law enforcement as it deals with kids getting involved with drugs and so forth is fantastic. I mean, check him out and find out what he's doing. He's doing some very admirable things.
Oh, absolutely. And he's a huge supporter of Tunnels to Towers. He supports law enforcement. He supports the military. He's like Gary Sinise and the Lieutenant Dan band, just
Yep.
people who just give and give and give and do not expect anything in return. So
Yep.
what a great guy.
Fantastic.
And then, Steve, this was one that you said, and she was a hoot. Sherry Oz, the special agent in charge of DEA, basically in Arizona, out of the Phoenix field office. And her sense of humor and the way that, again, it's just self-deprecating, talking about, between the guy's legs. You have to listen to the episode to understand what we're talking about.
Yep.
She is in the Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yep. With the last name like Oz, you've got to have a sense of humor, I would think. She was one of the best interviews we had on there. We appreciate Sherry coming on. And we've stayed in touch since then on some other projects, so it's all good.
Yeah, and but again, it's like one of those things. The way the world works. Right before we aired the episode, Steve,
Right. Yeah.
we had the shooting down there, and in fact, one of your colleagues had the name added to the wall this year, along with the task force officer.
Yeah. It's just very, very sad. It was poor timing. Anytime a police officer is killed, it's poor timing. But hearts go out to him and not him, to his family and the DEA family.
Yeah. Then we go on to somebody I got introduced to through a mutual friend of mine. This friend of mine, Mitch Cunningham, was the lead hostage negotiator for the Montgomery County Police Department and was there during the DC sniper case, 1 year after 9/11. Like 9/11 wasn't bad enough. Now we get a sniper going through the region. Well, he introduced us then into somebody who was there on the ground, was on the SWAT team, Jeff Nice. And again, another somebody who has battled disease, battled an affliction that could have taken his life,
Mm-hmm.
and just to hear how humble this guy is. He wrote a book, "Failure's Not an Option," and it's one thing to hear about it, but it's another thing to see it first person point of view as they take down the DC snipers. I mean, just the tempo they had to maintain for that long, Steve, is just incredible.
Yeah, and excuse me, but once again, the perseverance, the expertise, and the experience, and joining forces. You had multiple agencies there, which typically is competitive. But everybody was able to lay their badges aside and work together, that's what the successful conclusion resulted from in this investigation.
Yeah, badges, we don't need no stinking badges. And the people don't know the real origin of that. So here's a quick trivia. People think it comes from Blazing Saddles. No, it does not. It comes from Humphrey Bogart in the movie Treasure of the Sierra Madre. That's where it was originally said. Anyway, I digress. So we go
All
from there
right.
to somebody, the hardest name we've ever had to try to pronounce, and we couldn't. Rob Zacharicius or Zacharak. I can't pronounce his name. Zarahacheski. What is it?
I think the only I can't pronounce it either. I think the only people who can are him and his family. So we call him Rob Zach.
Is Rob Zach. We call him Zach, and we talked about the Merchant of Death, Victor Boot, and they made the movie Lord of War. Yuri Orlov, played by Nicolas Cage. I thought that was the bigger crime, his portrayal. Anyway, but again, I digress. But no, but here's another guy too. You talk about Steve like working hard, and this started off as a hold my beer moment.
Yeah, absolutely. It was. In fact, the one I just sent you today for a potential future interview, you'll see that same person, Juan Zarate, on that as we talk about it. But DEA was challenged by the National Security Advisory Council. Hey, you guys think you're hot shit. What, you ever heard of this guy named Victor Boot? You think you can take him down? And our chief of operations at the time, Mike Braun, looked over at one agent and they shook their head yes and said, we sure can. And they did.
And just to put this in perspective, this just wasn't some just side bet. This guy was able to fly below the radar because it's called low intensity conflict. He had been funding low intensity conflict in Africa and sub-Saharan Africa and a lot of those areas. One UN report attributed over 6 million deaths to the arms supplied by Victor Boot.
Unbelievable. Unfreaking believable.
So you think he ought to be arrested? I think so.
Hey, just go back to Jeff real quick. We forgot to mention Aaron Turner on there. That helped to break into the laptop that the snipers were using.
Oh, yeah. We forgot we did an embed episode. That's right. That was our special embedded episode. And Aaron, super geek extraordinaire, who, by the way, has a really successful he started a company. It was only like a year and a half old, and then they sold it. And Aaron no longer has to work if he doesn't want to.
Well, he has for a couple of years, but and actually he and I are doing some things together as well. So it's we'll see where that goes.
And Aaron Turner was the one that taught you how to play Halo on Xbox.
He's the one that kicked my ass, and then we brought in some 15-year-old kids who kicked his butt. So
if you wanted to know how your taxpayer dollars are being spent in the Special Operations Division of DEA, look no farther than Xbox and Halo.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I apologize to that, Aaron. I was going to ask you for a grant, but apparently I can't do that now. So I apologize very much.
Well.
Oh, well. Hey, and then we go from Rob Zach, we go to somebody who we are now doing an extended Patreon episode with him and Dave Mitchell, but it's our buddy, Chris the Fox Feistel. I mean, when you saw the hair he had and the Miami Vice look he had, this dude, and I'll tell you what, between him and a couple others, just like JP, like you talk about, encyclopedic knowledge, just what he remembers and the details. We talked about the takedown of the Cali cartel, which led us then to doing an extended version of the Real DEA Narcos, talking about the Real DEA Narcos Cali edition with him and Dave Mitchell, his partner, who they made season 3 of Narcos about.
Right. His recall, and I always say this about Javier. Javier has a brain like an encyclopedia. It's amazing. His recall is amazing, and Chris is as good as Javier, if not better. I mean, he remembers very minute, specific details, locations, dates, times. It was a hell of an interview.
And the location of certain rooms at Finca Napoles. So Javier does.
You have to listen to find out what we're talking about.
You have to listen to find out. Well, look, then we went on to our next Canadian, and this guy was fun, Steve Metelsky.
Yeah.
He's doing what he loves right now. He's teaching kids, but he did some badass stuff. And if there's somebody else who has an encyclopedic knowledge of something, it's Steve. And I thought Canadians were nice. I had no idea how entrenched the mob was in Canada.
I was shocked also, but what's really shocking is when they held the ceremony to make a criminal a made man in the mafia. It's not what you think. It's not what you might have seen on TV.
It's a couple of velour suits at Super 8 motel in a room with an unmade bed going, "Hey, you guys doing good? Okay, raise your right hand. I so and so agree to be a criminal. Okay, we're done.
Let's go to the
Let's go to the
buffet.
buffet.
That's right.
Let's head out to the buffet." Oh
Oh,
my
that's
god,
funny.
that was but Steven has also, helped us get one of our next, guests that will be coming up later. We'll tell you about,
Yeah,
when we get there, but, Steve, great guy, and, we just he's written a book too, and which you happen to be featured in. Although it
yep.
wasn't technically undercover, he was pandering to you because he wanted to be on our podcast. I know what it was, Steve.
I told him up front I did very little undercover, but it worked. So, and we've stayed in touch. He's become a real good friend.
And now the next one, though, this is a story, if you want to talk about, I think out of all the stories we have, somebody who's overcome, I think, the biggest odds of survival. It's Joe Piersanti.
Yep, absolutely. A DE agent who was have for pretty much his whole life has been a bodybuilder, former Detroit police officer before DEA. Volunteered to be on one of our teams called the Fast Teams and was deployed to Afghanistan, where he had a very, very, very bad and life changing experience. This guy was shot
Ver-
in the head.
And they
I
thought he
mean,
was dead.
yeah, he's blind now, but the man persevered. He came on. He finished his career with DEA. He had to work in a little bit of a different capacity, but maintained his special agent status. Is now out doing motivational speaking. He goes to hospitals with wounded soldiers and relates to them. And on top of that, recently, within the less than the past year, won in his age group the world uh, bodybuilding championship, which made him a lifetime member of this organization. I mean, this guy's got muscles on top of his muscles on top of his muscles. And his personality is fantastic. So easy to get along with. Really, really nice guy.
And you know what, too? You want muscles like that when you saw how heavy of a weapon he was carrying in Afghanistan. So you,
Oh
you
my
give those to the
gosh.
big guys, not the little guys.
Yeah. I mean, stand up guy. So, and
Yeah.
he's now doing motivational speaking. So if you know anybody that's looking for speakers, contact us. We'll put you in touch with Joe.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. This is a story you got to hear. Well, then this one was a fun one too.
Hmm. Yeah.
This was a guy who, if we had kept talking, we could have talked for 12 hours easily because Luis Navia. You wanted to, this is why it's so important to set context, not just get into the story. Well, tell us about the 26 tons of cocaine. No, listen to this guy talk about growing up in Cuba, Fidel Castro, Meyer Lansky,
Hmm.
going to the best. This guy had everything given to him. And then why did he get involved in becoming one of the largest drug traffickers in the world?
And not only worked in that business for 25 years, survived a
Survived.
kidnapping by a cartel leader, the North Valley Cartel in Colombia, who was known for never releasing anybody, that he murdered everybody who got kidnapped. And
Rascuño.
yep, and Luis survived that, which that and I was shocked when I heard that. That's yeah, to my knowledge, he's the only person that ever walked away from one of those.
I thought he was about to be fed to the alligators too.
Well, that was down in Mexico. Yep, he was.
So he
He's
survived twice, alligators and Rascuño.
he's like a cat with 9 lives, I guess.
Yeah, and he got, he did his time in prison and he got out. Now he's a legitimate businessman. But guess what? He still stays in touch with the guys who arrested him. They go out and they have lunch, and that's be a future episode we talk about.
Yep, yep. In fact, they got together recently, and I think Javi and I were traveling, and I missed the phone call with them, but I saw pictures later where they'd gone out and had lunch together over in Tampa.
Well, and then we go from there again. This is another one of those stories of somebody who probably shouldn't survived, but
Oh, absolutely.
did. Alex Collins, and we're gonna run into Alex, I think, at the gang conference too. But
Mhm.
San Bernardino County, Chris. I don't want to mention this piece of shit. This is a guy we thought was honorable, served his country, wanted to become an LAPD officer, and then thinks he's slighted, and he goes rogue and he starts killing people. And one
Yeah.
of the people killed was Alex's partner.
Mhm.
But I'll tell you, Steve, this episode, the one thing that pissed me off more than anything else, and like you and I said at the beginning, we call it out. It's like with this Vicky and Casey White, just because you wear a badge doesn't mean you get a free pass. You got to be doing the righteous thing.
Right.
And for those two officers, and I don't even want to mention their departments, but where they left him and his partner in the middle of the road and hid behind a car instead
Mhm.
of dragging them to safety, providing you could lay down covering fire, grab those people. Well, it was too heavy, and then they get fucking awards for it. To
Yeah.
this day, still pisses me off.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. You gotta look out for each other, and I mean, listen to the episode, you'll find out exactly what we're talking about. It's a little bit of a long story, but I think you'll have the same reaction we have.
Eh, eh, uh, Yeah, and it's still, I right now, I even kind of feel like goosebumps coming because it just something like that just really pisses you off. But then we
Right.
go episode 25. This was a good one.
Hmm.
And he ended up being part of a special live stream review we did of the greatest Christmas movie ever made. Yes, Die Hard. Rick Massa from LAPD was on the ground when you see the story about the North Hollywood shootout with those two dudes who had been robbing left and right armored cars, and they moved to Bank of America and were robbing those things. As luck would have it, two officers driving by see them walking into the bank. These are what they called the takeover bandits.
Hmm.
They would come in and take over, and they were heavily armed. And yet, three SWAT officers dressed in shorts, they were out training and stuff. These guys hightail it down to the area. They get involved in the action, and they help take out both of these heavily armed guys. And I mean, just what a fantastic story and what a great guy. And by the way, Rick was trained as a chef by Wolfgang Puck.
That's that is pretty cool. I mean, you got to listen to that because that's the last. Well, how can I say the last thing we ever thought we'd be doing after DEA is the Netflix story and all the stuff that we're doing now. But that's true. The last thing I would ever think I was doing is working with a professional chef and winning awards for my meals that I'm preparing. Holy cow, that was fantastic.
Uh, so and then we did in December we didn't do a vote. We just said, look, we're reviewing Die Hard, the greatest Christmas movie ever made, and we got expert analysis from LAPD SWAT themselves, Rick Massa, and we determined nobody in LAPD SWAT says maintain your reconnoiter.
Ah, that's hilarious.
Doesn't happen. Now, this next one too, I'm extremely proud because we will also see her down at the Southern California Gang Conference. Claudia Polinar, her and
Yeah,
her partner were shot, ambushed
right.
during the whole uprising, during the whole COVID stuff, all of the unrest that was going on during the country during that time. Cops were literally under attack, and her partner are sitting, waiting. They were doing transit protection and stuff for the LA County Sheriff, and ambushed. And she is shot through the face. But guess what? She takes care of her partner, leave nobody behind. She's on, you can see on video her putting the tourniquet on her partner who's also severely wounded. She cares about him before she takes care of herself. And you want to talk about just, I mean, I'm very proud to see people like this. Um, her training kicked in. She was still kind of a rookie. She did not have that much experience,
Right.
but the training kicked in. She saved her life. She saved her partner's life.
And I've started following her on social media, and it's great to see what she's doing. In her interview, you'll hear what her future plans are because she's not backing down. I mean,
Nope.
she was wounded in the line of duty, and she's still ready to jump right back in the fight. So, really excited we're going to have the opportunity to meet her in person.
And speaking of strong females, this next one, she doesn't mince words. Cheryl O'Connor, somebody I met down here. She was a Richmond police officer who was also, and we didn't mean for these episodes to go back to back like this because Claudia was shot through the face. Cheryl was shot through the face, ambushed by somebody who had already killed
Right.
several people.
Piece
And
of trash.
yeah, piece of and just what she endured, what she did, how she came back from it, her attitude even to this day, because her and I stay in touch. I see what's going on down there, and I mean, she is. I just no words to describe. A lot of people back in the and when she came on, there were very few women in law enforcement, and the ones that weren't treated very well, in my opinion. But
Absolutely. She's just a tough lady. I mean, she's
oh,
from the
fuck,
Boston suburbs. She calls
she'll
a
kick
spade a
your
spade.
ass.
Absolutely. I wouldn't make her mad.
No, I don't want to make her mad. And this was great too because we kind of this was I think Women's Month, and we kind of did all of these during Women's Month because we go from Cheryl, who is a great story, to Trisha Cannon, a Georgia Bureau of Investigation agent. That's Georgia, Joja, Georgia
Yep.
Bureau of Investigation, and her. This is one, Steve, where everybody's committed, but she, I think, took it to another level. Her commitment to solving crime, the case that she worked, the way that she made the promise to that young girl who was a victim of sex trafficking that I'm going to be there for you. 3 years investigating this case to make sure that they came up with the people who were involved in this. Thousands of hours, all these different accounts, back page, phones, messages, emails, tracking down the person. And she was persistent, and she was true to her word. She was there for that victim every step of the way.
She was phenomenal. I mean, just you can't. That's the dedication to serving the public. What a great example she set for everybody.
Oh, I just it makes me proud. I'm humbled to think that we have these people on our podcast because I'm going. It's like sitting around a bar and it's like you start telling your stories. It's like I got nothing. You talk to these people and pretty soon you go, I got nothing.
Yeah,
And
not
it,
compared
but
to what
it's
they've done.
yeah, it's an honor.
Yep.
Well, this next one too. This is probably one of the most emotional stories we've told too, and it's a friend of yours.
Oh,
So I'll let you tee that one up.
Sherry Foster, I love her like a sister. Know her entire family very well. Javier and I both do. I've known Sherry for a long, long time. She started as a local cop in Georgia, then she went to the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, and then she became a DE agent.
No, that's
She,
Joja.
yeah,
Joja.
what you said. Yeah,
Joja Bureau of Investigation.
speaks fluent Spanish. Was stationed in was it Bolivia or Peru? I think in Peru for a while, and then eventually got stationed in Colombia. But when she tells her story, I had no idea of her background, how she grew up. And it just, my heart just broke for her. I mean, if you know this lady, she's one of the most energetic, most upbeat people you'll ever meet. And you talk about somebody that didn't let her circumstances bring her down, that overcame the circumstances and made herself a huge success. And now what she's doing now to help battered women through the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Georgia, which is Atlanta, it's amazing. It's nothing short of amazing. I just have immense. I loved her to start with, and now I have the utmost respect for Sherry Foster. Just fantastic.
And her tagline was how to be a victor, not a victim.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, Sherry's working on a series of books, and she introduced me to her development editor, which is now my development editor, because I'm actually working on a series of books too. So Sherry introduced me to this. But the other thing too, I think was very fantastic about this is because somebody listened to our podcast. They reached out to Sherry and they had her present to a local women's group.
Hmm.
And this, you talk about getting outside your comfort zone, but we're so proud of Sherry for doing that and for telling her story and showing you can go through a lot of things, but you got to make a choice. You can either be a victor or a victim. And she chose to
Hmm.
be a victor. And I think it shows to today.
Absolutely. Just so proud of you, lady. Just, I mean, proud.
Yeah. Well, this next episode, it took us a SWAT team to get this person on the episode. And then when we got her on the episode, it took a SWAT team to get her off the episode because she said, no, I wasn't finished. Let me come back and I got to record more. Again, Steve, this is somebody I think you're a tad bit familiar with. I'll let you tee this one up.
Yeah, this is, we got a lot of interest, especially from our fan group on Facebook, about bringing my wife on, Connie. And Connie's known me since when we met. I was a police officer in West Virginia, so she's never known me to do anything else. But she is one of the bravest women I've ever met. When we first met, I used to ride motorcycles. She had her own motorcycle. How can you not fall in love with a woman that owns her own motorcycle, right? And it was as much her idea to go to Colombia after we'd been in Miami and been through everything there. She was a registered nurse. She loved the excitement of the hospital, the trauma units, the ICUs. She finished up in a cardiac cath lab where you literally have a person's life in your hands because you're going into the artery in your leg to put the caths into the heart. But when she did her interview, I've had several people call me and they're like, dude, she didn't cut you any slack at all. And that's what you want. Put it out there. I made a joke about how fortunate she is to be married to a peach like me.
Yeah. And that went over like a turd in a punch bowl with her. It's like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, that's what she still says that.
But again, but I mean, if you looked at that, we had a string of women there. What do we have? We had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in a row.
Yep.
And the thing is, I look at other podcasts. Very few people do interviews in true crime. It's about them reading a story and pretending to be an expert on shit they're not experts about.
Right.
But what do? We bring the real experts on, the people who were there, the people who lived it. So that's the cool thing. And this next person too, talk about an encyclopedic knowledge. Steve Cook,
Oh
Mr.
man.
Mr. Outlaw Motorcycle Gang himself. And the knowledge he's got and the people he's connected with and the stuff he's done. And this was a master class. Like Metelsky gave us a master class in organized crime.
Yep.
Steve gave us, the other Steve, gave us a master class in outlaw motorcycle gangs.
And he invited Javier and I to speak at one of his conferences. He puts on I don't know if it's annual, but he puts on a lot of training classes throughout the year. And this one was called Gangs, Guns, and Drugs. So we flew out to Las Vegas. We got to meet Steve in person, did our full program for the class, got to meet his lovely wife, Amy. And then later that same week, Javier and I were speaking at the Mob Museum in Vegas. So we were able to bring Steve and Amy and Lou Velosi in, as well as Javier's wife, to the museum with us, and just had a blast with these guys. So we've not only, professionally had him on the show and become friends that way, but now we're personal friends as well. So Steve, thank you, and Amy, and had a blast with you guys.
Oh yeah, and then because of that, kind of led us to our next person. So if Steve was giving us a master class in outlaw motorcycle gangs, our next guy, Jay
Oh,
Bird, gave us a master class on how to investigate outlaw motorcycle gangs. And just Jay Dobbins is when they use the word legend, they mean people like Jay Dobbins.
you took the word right out of my mouth there. This guy is a true legend in law enforcement. The only undercover law enforcement, or any police officer to become a patched member of the Hells Angels. I mean, if you don't know anything about motorcycle gangs, listen to these guys and find out. For him to get to that level is just unheard of.
Yeah, and he actually worked with Sherry Oz. They were investigating Hell's Angels back in Arizona, and Sherry learned from Jay Bird on a case she was working later how to fake a death. So you have to understand how these guys went through fake the death to create the credibility so that they could become affiliated with the Hell's Angels, and it
And
just oh, man, oh.
he still carries the scar of working with Sherry Oz.
Well, that was also Lou Velosi too. So,
Oh, brother Lou. Yeah, you're right. I'm sorry. You're right.
yeah, no, I wasn't sure it was Lou. Yeah, and then we'll have somebody coming up in a little bit too, who was the third part of that story that was there. We actually have witnesses to this too. So, but no, hey, and the other thing too is I felt bad too because Jay got bohica'd. He got screwed in the end,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't mean it both ends. At the end of his career and at the end, it's just that's the other thing too. We call out bullshit. The bureaucracy sometimes. You got to take care of people. It's like, well, we'll talk about a later case, and Steve, you talked about too. Sometimes you got to take care of your people, and that means you do what needs to be done to take care of them because of everything they've done for you. But then you get some fucking bureaucrats, people who were involved, by the way, in Fast and Furious, fucking desk jockey, swivel chair Monday morning commandos
Yep.
who screwed Jay over.
That's petty bureaucracy and jealousy. I mean, holy cow, it's unbelievable. Listen to the episode; you'll find out what we're talking about.
Well,
He doesn't hold
again,
back.
we're getting pumped up. Well,
Yeah.
speaking of pumped up, this next dude is a fucking stud too. Jared Reston.
Oh yeah,
Another guy shot in the face, but here's somebody who took his training seriously, who worked out, and the will to this. If nothing else, this episode right here is a supreme example of what it means to have the will to live. Some people, if they get injured, they just curl up in a ball and expect to die. This dude was like, "Fuck you, I'm
Right.
coming after you."
Yep, and he did. And now he's retired from Jacksonville Police Department in Florida and has his own training company. So he's taken his experience and
Yep.
his almost fatal experience, and he's teaching that to other police officers on how to survive. Fantastic dude.
Well, fantastic. And just like I said, just a great guy. And they're very open about talking about their injuries, their recovery, and everything else. So, and the thing is, he went back to work. He went back on the SWAT team, just like Alex Collins did, even after being injured. He went back, got his dream job, which is to be on SWAT. So, I mean, just very proud to have guys like that on. And,
Yep,
and
very
this next
motivational.
guy, this next one too, this actually elicited a lot of response from people because Aaron, another buddy of yours that you
Mhm.
worked with, but the work he's doing now, and we started talking. This was probably one of the most educational episodes we had. I think that had a huge impact, and it was the issue of counterfeit medication.
Right. So Aaron was started out as a San Diego, California police officer, then became a DEA agent. And we're going to have him on a future episode because he has so many adventures. We only covered one adventure in this interview. He
And
was
the one that
stationed
we
in-
covered, he didn't even tell his wife about, and it's like, oh, sorry, dear.
Yeah. Well, and he sent me a text message the other day. We've been we stay in close touch with each other, and he said that even his wife is pretty proud of what occurred during that interview. I don't want to spoil it for our listeners here. You need to listen to that one, but it's extremely informative. And so, what I was going to say is, Aaron was stationed in Mexico when Javi and I were in Colombia. So the leads that we were developing in Colombia that we're sending to Mexico, he was out doing the same thing we were doing. That's just they never made a narco show about it. So I mean, it's amazing the tales he has. And on top of everything else, he's joining us in San Diego at the Southern California Gang Conference here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Just
And we should
phenomenal
catch
guy.
up, and we should catch up on a couple of those things down there. But again, somebody else, when his wife listened to the podcast, she's like, "Oh, you did that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't quite tell you. I didn't want you to worry." So we we got some more of those. But look, we go from Aaron Graham to somebody else who I tell you, if you want to talk about lessons in leadership, and again, they made a movie about this, Training Day. Denzel Washington, Ethan
Hmm.
Hawke, Rich Mraz, Captain LAPD, was there at Rampart during the Rampart scandal, and this guy could have tucked his tail and just go hid and stuff, but he took a lot of arrows, so to speak. He took bullets, and he lived to survive. He went through some really tough stuff, and now he teaches lessons in leadership
Yep.
on how to recognize this slippery slope, this things that happen when you start compromising integrity and where it leads to.
And it's so cool that he did that because I know so many cops that would have become so bitter about what happened in that entire investigation, and they're kind of making him somewhat of a scapegoat in that, but he didn't let that get him down either. He admitted to whatever mistakes were made and he corrected those, finished his career, and he's continuing to help others so that they don't make the mistakes. I mean, just extremely admirable what he's done in life after LAPD.
Uh, Again, yeah, just stand up guys. Now, but when you listen to his history, though, the stuff he did, the things he was involved with, he was destined to be in that spot at that time. And so,
Hmm.
just again, just he could have tucked tail and run, but he didn't. He stood up. And whether you like the story or not, you have to admire the fact that the guy didn't flinch. He stood his ground, and is teaching people from that. But I'll tell you,
Yeah,
this next episode, though, Steve, Victor Avila, man, just another guy who I think got screwed over by his agency.
yeah,
Him and his partner was killed.
yep.
He was badly wounded. The cartels came after him, and just the way they treated him, I just thought was despicable.
It absolutely was, and so we don't want to go too far with this, but we were looking at some of the pictures, and the reason that they were out on that highway that day when they were attacked is criminal.
Was not
It,
a government operation, let's say.
yeah, to be on a highway that they were forbidden by the ambassador to drive on because it was so dangerous, and yet his supervisor makes him and Jaime Zapata go out there, and Jaime paid for it with his life. Victor was shot. I mean, it's
Yeah.
horrible. It's horrific what this story is all about.
And Jaime's name is up on the wall that we talked about in one of our, again, Patreon episodes. We did a special for our Warden of the Throne folks, and we talk about the meaning of Police Week and what those names go on the wall, how much significance they have. So
Yep.
never forget.
Yep.
But he was great. But here's something else a lot of people didn't know. Do you know Victor holds the world's record for longest pistol shot?
You know what? It's on YouTube. Go take a look at it. It's
Yeah.
unbelievable. It takes from the time he fires the shot until the bullet hits the target. I mean, it's like 7 or 8, 10, 12 seconds. It's unbelievable.
Freaking amazing. Again, I don't even want to tell you the difference the distance, because you wouldn't believe him. I told you. Go look up
Exactly.
at Victor Avila, a pistol world record,
Yep.
and just look for yourself. I mean,
Yep.
this was obvious. Now, this next episode, I think he was in the running with Dominic Polifrone for most F bombs dropped in an episode. And there's some people I love this guy. I love Tommy.
Yeah.
They have a man crush or a woman crush on Tommy Cindric, but man, uh,
And we've had a couple negative comments about people using the F bomb. We're not telling our guests what to say, ladies and gentlemen. This is, we list our podcast as explicit, and we want them to be themselves. We don't want them to pretend to be something they're not. That way, it's more authentic that you get to listen to it. So if the F bomb bothers you, we're probably
it's
not
a
the
clue.
right
We mark our
podcast for you.
podcasts explicit. So
Yeah.
if you're listening, expect that. But this is another one that a book was written about. Now it's not on our page because Tommy didn't write it. We only want to showcase the work that's done by our guests. But Hunting LaRue
Yeah.
was a book that was written about it. I mean, this guy, as we said, was the modern day James Bond villain. This guy was
He's like a
responsible for killing
he's like
people.
I'm
Yeah.
like a master criminal, and he was a nerd. He was a really big nerd. But I mean, even when they were arrested, he had on these big baggy shorts and a shirt that looked like a burlap sack and raggy ass flip flops.
And regular handcuffs would not work on this guy. They had to
Yeah.
improvise to even get this guy handcuffed.
I tell you what, I got so excited reading that book, Hunting the Row, probably because I knew a lot of the people that were involved in it, but the extent of the sacrifices that DEA agents will make to put their lives in danger, go to all parts of the world. I mean, your family suffers from it because you're away from home so much. Tommy and he was involved in this. Rob Zach was also involved in this as well. Several other, I mean, a lot of agents around the world, but fantastic story with an unbelievable ending. I just can't say enough about these guys.
Yeah. A fucking fabulous fucking ending, according to Tommy. And then we go from that to somebody who is, from a personality, maybe kind of the polar opposite of Tommy Cindric, and that's Jimmy Capra. I mean, I thought it was a
Yeah.
wonderful life. Are you related to James Capra? But so Jimmy, 21 tons of cocaine and 12 million in cash. I think at that time, maybe it still ranks as the largest domestic seizure of cocaine in the United States.
It was the largest seizure of coke and money in the same location because the traffickers never put the dope and the money in the same location. These guys screwed up and did, and Jimmy went out and spanked them for it. And the funny
And
thing
all
about that,
protected by a frickin' $6 lock on the door.
well, and remember all the negative comments he was getting from DEA headquarters. Oh, you guys are full of shit. That's not what they do. That's kiddie dope. Well, what do you say now, there, big boy?
And he, by the way, is our most prolific author. I think he's got 4 or 5 books on our page that he's written. He's written on leadership, but he's written some family books. Really, a family guy, very dedicated. Still goes out and teaches leadership lessons.
Yep.
I mean, he really is a wonderful guy.
And he's a legend in DEA. I mean, this guy made it up to chief of operations for us, and the man could get his butt chewed by some of the administrators who were holding that position at the time, and he'd come into a meeting with a smile on his face. He never let that affect him negatively, and he never portrayed that to anybody else. You wouldn't even know that anything had happened. I just have the utmost respect for Jimmy Capra, one of my really, really good friends.
Yeah. Now, our next story is also, this is somebody I reached out to, and we really revolved around the shooting down at the hostage situation and the shooting down at the Jewish synagogue in Colleyville, Texas. Because I know the chief of police there, Michael Miller, and I saw her tweeting about this, and I'd seen her before, so I just reached out, and said, "Hey, I saw you wrote a book. Want to talk to you about it?" She goes, "Absolutely." So we got Tracy Walder on, and what was unique about Tracy? She checked a couple boxes for us because we had not interviewed anybody from the FBI yet, and nor had we talked to anybody who had a background in the CIA. And she did both. And here is somebody that when you look at, you think, oh, just a sorority girl bouncing around USC. She,
Yeah.
she became a certified badass, chasing terrorists around the world, chemical weapons. The work she did, both in the agency and the FBI. I mean, and then I just saw a tweet too, Steve. She just retired after 15 years of teaching school of history. So, I mean, and her book too, you got to read it. It's the unexpected spy,
Mhm. Yeah, and the way she was treated by both agencies is
Yeah.
almost criminal as well, but she didn't let that drag her down, just like some of the other heroes we've had on here. And you know what? I was just looking through my LinkedIn earlier this week, and we have a lot of followers on. It's just my personal thing, Stephen Murphy, but um, we've had over 12,000, almost 13,000 hits where I put out that she was on our podcast on this episode. And that, for me, that's a lot. If I get, 12 hits, I think that's a lot. Here we're getting almost 13,000 people hitting on that just to take a look and see about her interview.
What a great story too, and it's just her perspective of the world and the things she did. This is why you want good people serving our country, folks. You don't want to run them off. You want good people like her serving our country.
Absolutely. Great job, Tracy.
Now, here's a friend of mine. So we get the other thing we're very good at doing too is getting all angles of the story. And well, this one is not the stripper hitting or Jaybird in the face yet story. This one is about Bill Sarukas. Now, Billy Sarukas is somebody I knew from when I was doing work inside the government, let's say, and Billy was over at the U.S. Marshals, and we got to know each other through America's Most Wanted and John Walsh and John Clark, who was the director of the Marshals at the time. I didn't realize how involved Billy was in the capture of the DC sniper suspects till we did his interview. And if you commit a crime, there's one person I definitely do not want tracking me down. That's Bill Sarukas.
Absolutely. And as we discussed, or as we talked through the interview, he and I had met each other years earlier, and I apologize to Billy that I didn't remember him. But this is the guy who really solved the sniper case because everybody else thought it was going a different way. And Billy stood his ground. He's an unbelievably adept investigator, and he was right. I mean, it's phenomenal what he did. And it's amazing how he tracks people down, isn't it, Morgan?
Yeah, especially like you coming out of a hotel in Chicago. "Hey, Murph, how'd you find me here? Oh my god."
I was getting out of Javier and I are getting out of an Uber. We're in downtown Chicago. Billy comes walking up. "Hey, Murph, I was looking for you." "Well, damn, how'd you know I was here?"
Oh, that's spooky. That's some spooky shit right there. But the one thing Billy and I do have in common is we both love the University of Notre Dame. His dad was involved with the university and the football team and the
Yeah,
scorekeeper and the clock keeper. And Billy grew up there. So we get back to Notre Dame. We'll do, he has already told us about. We're invited to his tailgate party, which I will participate in. Go Irish this year.
yeah.
So now Steve Metelsky introduced us
Steve's
to this next guest.
Yep.
Steve, no, you got to listen, Murph. Don't get
I
ahead of
am.
me here.
I am.
Steve
I'm listening.
Metelsky introduced us to our next guest, who is also named Steve, Steve Smith. So we got three Steves: Steve Metelsky, Steve Murphy, and now Steve Smith. But Steve Smith is a cold case investigator, Toronto, a sergeant up there, and just again, it's one of those things. You talk about tenacity. I want guys like
Yeah.
this working cases like this. The amount of hurdles they had to go through, the familiar. This is a case of familial DNA. They use genetic genealogy to track down the suspect, and we don't want to give it away because you have to listen to the story. But I mean, the persistence and the things that they did to solve just a single case, much less all the other cases they solved, but solved a single case. If people knew how much time and effort police officers and detectives and agents, federal agents put into solving cases, you would be amazed.
Well, and the cool thing about this too is they were able to eliminate people who were innocent but certainly looked guilty from the physical evidence. It's amazing, and here's what I really like about Steve and his group is you meet so many police officers that when they get years on the job, they think they know everything, and they're not really interested in new technology. Well, these guys weren't like that at all. They went to classes to learn more about DNA, and man, they are kicking butt on their investigations. It's unbelievable what they do.
And just like I said, and their impetus that basically what inspired them to do this is they went to some training where some people talked about the Golden State Killer and how they used familial DNA to track that piece of garbage down.
Hmm.
So that was good stuff. Well, we go from that to now the third leg of the stripper story. So we had
Yeah.
Lou, we had Jay, and now we got Chris Bayless. And you talk about another legend, a guy who just what a number one, what a humble guy, but then what a just he is an operator, man. There's no other word. This guy is the real deal.
You know what? If I'm thinking of a real tough guy, I mean, a guy who doesn't toot his own horn, but you better not screw with him, it's Chris Bayless. And this is a guy that Jay Dobbins and Lou Velozzi look up to. They'll tell you that the Chrisser, they call him the Chrisser. Chrisser is the guy that they learn from, that they go to for advice. Um, and to have him on the show, he's become a friend now. It's just unbelievable that we get access to people like this. His story is just fantastic, and he's continuing to do good things even in retirement. And the thing that I really like about him, and you'll hear it at the end of our interview with Chris, is he uses facts to justify a position. He doesn't use other people's opinions. He doesn't listen to the media who try to exploit things and blows things completely out of reality. So
Yeah, no,
I
he
love this
takes the
guy.
facts. He looks at the facts and then develops a position based on the facts, not the other way around. He doesn't develop a position and then find the facts that fit his theory. So, but
Right.
yeah, he combats gun violence. But I'll tell you, the biggest takeaway for me on this was he actually called me and just wanted to let me know is that he had people reaching out to him. We talked about a lot of these episodes. We talk about suicide. We talk about people who
Mhm.
got into really dark places. Lou talked about it. He was very upfront about it. Jay, these some people were very close to
Mhm.
ending their life. And Chris talks about the impact about how he started working with a psychologist, a PhD, to bring other people to it. And other people, after they heard the episode, reached out to Chris, said, "Hey, can you help me?" So, I mean,
Uh,
to me, that was a huge win.
Fantastic. And just that right there alone makes that one of the best episodes we've had on all the episodes of Game of Crimes because it's potentially saving lives.
Well, here's somebody else who's saving lives. I have no doubt, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She is a force of nature. Christy Schiller, man, what can you say about the legend, the myth, the person who watching TV one night and saw a story about a police officer, a canine handler who lost his dog that was killed? It was choked to death by. There were after two suspects, and one of the guys attacked the dog and choked it to death. It affected her so much. She said, "Hold my beer." I thought,
Yep.
I'm going to do something about this. And she did. And she created Canines for Cops and Canines for Kids, which have actually spawned several stories for us. And Christy, no law enforcement background other than you have to hear her story. She was a victim
Yeah.
of a serial offender, and
Yeah.
she's lucky she survived.
This is you know what? I've come to love Christy, and I don't even know her. I mean, other than, our interview with her, I hope I have the opportunity to meet her in person someday. This is a lady who saw an issue, and we all say something, you see something on TV and you'll say, "Oh, somebody ought to do something about that." Not Christy. Just like you said, she said, "Hold my beer." She went out and did something. Her Canine for Cops has donated over 300 police dogs to agencies around the United States and one agency in France who really don't have the budget to have a canine. And she's not slowing down. I mean, this woman's got more energy than any 10 men I know, I think. She's unbelievable. So hats off to you, Christy.
Oh yeah, and so we've got a couple stories coming up that got the whole thing kicked off. We're actually going to talk to the officer that day who lost his dog, and this will get it
Mhm.
started. But again, what great stuff! And then here's another one too that a movie has been made, a couple books have been written, and it looks like another movie is about to be made. And this guy had the distinction of working, I think, at three separate federal agencies.
Mhm.
Bob Mazer.
Yeah, Bob is, after our interview, I didn't know about his second undercover right before he retired. I'm thinking we ought to send him for some psychological testing here because this
Why the
guy,
hell?
you talk about deep cover. This guy went deep cover on the money laundering side of the Medellin cartel successfully, survived it, comes back out, and then gets involved against the Cali cartel on the money laundering side. And it's just this guy's life is in danger every day he opens his eyes. He's putting his family behind. You know, Bob was with us the last time we went to the Southern California Gang Conference. He was there as a speaker also, so we got to meet in person. But man, I'm just doing some phenomenal work. You've got to listen to his interview. It's amazing. It's amazing that guys are putting their lives on the line like this.
Yeah, and I'll tell you too. The other thing too, he wrote a book called The Betrayal. You got to read that too because again, our saying is that nobody hates a bad cop more than a good cop,
Hmm.
and this is how he potentially was set up
Yep.
by a bad cop. And so you have to listen to the episode and understand why that upset us as well too. But Bob Mazer, man, he's going through something right now, so we wish him all the best for that too. So
True.
the next one now ties back to Luis Navia. We always tie these things together. So Eric Kolbinski, um, such a nice guy, but he's a riot, and I literally mean he's a riot.
he's he's the proverbial contrarian, I think would be the way I describe him. Somebody says, "Hey, this is it," and he's like, "Yeah, no, it's not. Let's take a closer look at this." And I love that about him.
He started a riot at the Grateful Dead concert.
Well, somebody had to do it.
That might as well be me, but then again, he gets involved with Luis Navia, ends up being his handler. Basically, he's not so involved in the case up until that point.
Right.
But afterwards, him and Luis just basically clicked, and he ended up becoming his handler and working with him and managing him with under other agencies and stuff. And but he's got some great stories too, and just he's a tall guy too. But when we said he was a riot, yeah, he was a riot.
Yeah, or caused riots, something like that.
Cause rise, something like that. Yeah. But Eric was cool. Well, then the next episode, we have episode 46. We're getting close to the end here. But Ted Dolan. Ted Dolan was the inspiration for Canines for Cops. It was his partner
Mhm.
that he lost. And we don't just say dog, he lost his partner. It was his partner. It affected him. In fact, Ted will tell you that even his boss later told him, son, you need to go get some help, because it affected him so badly. Even years later, he was still struggling with how to manage his emotions because of that.
He was, and the job that he's doing down there, he's like all these other heroes we talk about on here, has not let that get him down. He's continuing to do an outstanding job. He sets a standard for other canine officers to follow, and he's leading the way. So it's a fantastic story, courtesy of Christy Schiller.
Yeah, Black was the canine that lost his life that inspired everything else. So as Ted said, he said, "Look, these guys thought they killed a dog." He said, "No, what they did is they put another 300 on the street." So
Exactly.
yeah, the joke's
Exactly.
on them. So assholes.
Yep.
And we also talk about too about the laws around protecting canines. So it's a really great episode, and you will come to understand the people who handle canines. They're extremely dedicated to their work because these dogs are high maintenance. You have to train them, you have to take care of them. They want these dogs live to work, and they dogs are the only thing on earth that love you more than they love themselves, and they
Yep.
will literally work themselves to death before giving up. And so this is why what Ted does and the other folks do is so important. Well, we go from that to somebody. It's kind of a contradiction in terms because when we started interviewing, he started saying, well, I'm the FBI, but he was very humble about it. He says, I'm very honored to be on here, very humbled. I'd never heard anybody from the FBI use that and the word humble in the same sentence. And Jerry Clark is a man of men.
Yeah, he was a fantastic interview, and this one came about from a friend of mine, Kevin Barwin, who's lives in Erie, Pennsylvania, and we've been friends for several years. We were all snowbirds together down in Melbourne, Florida, for the past several years, and every morning when we're at the beach, Kevin and I we get up early before the sun rises, and we get our coffee, and we go out and sit and watch the sun come up, and we solve the problems of the entire world there in about 2 hours, and then the world goes all to hell in a handbasket, and the next day we have to do the same thing again. But just in conversation one day, he said, "Did you ever hear about the pizza bomber?" And I hadn't. I can't believe that I hadn't because of the notoriety of this case. But I went and looked it up. I bought the book, read about Jerry Clark, called him, or I actually emailed him. He's a professor now at a college in Erie, Pennsylvania, and he didn't hesitate. Man, he was one of the most excited people I've called yet. To hey, could you possibly be on a show for an interview? And he got me excited because he was so excited. But the story he tells, I mean, it's in depth. It's multiple years, the challenges that they faced. He turned down potential promotions. It's just an unbelievable story. And you're right, Morgan. The humble side of Jerry is not indicative of most of the FBI people we know,
And
especially in the
we love
supervisor
the
level.
FBI, but it's required by law that we pick on them at least once an episode. So
There you
what can I
go.
tell you?
Yeah.
But Jerry was a great guy. Now, another story that was spawned from Christy then Ted. We talked to Randy Tooman, who is a sergeant with the Fayette County Sheriff's Office down in Texas, and him and Colt are just killing it out there on the interstates, I-10. I mean, they are seizing things left and right. But the biggest, but just to put this in perspective, they seized 15 pounds. I think it was or 15 kilos of fentanyl. That 15 kilos was worth $100 million, and it could have killed at a minimum half the state of Texas, half of the Republic of Texas. One stop could have taken out half the Republic.
Yeah. It's unbelievable. I mean, we all know what a scourge fentanyl has become here in the United States. And these guys that are out there, especially the canine officers that are doing traffic stops. Traffic stops one of the most dangerous thing a police officer can do because you really don't know who you're coming up against from the get go. And we saw some. He told us a story about where he crawled under a vehicle to access a hidden compartment and had liquid dropping down on him,
Yeah.
which ended up being liquid meth. That's if that had been fentanyl, the man would have died right there.
And what do we say,
So
kids? Don't do meth, and don't do it
absolutely.
accidentally either.
And what that kind of led to is we have a friend, another retired DE agent who's involved with companies that have equipment that may not may that will help um, Randy and these other canine officers to do their job more safely. So we put them in touch, and but I love hearing these stories about the canine officers. I mean, everything from what they do on duty to what their family life is like as well. It's it's really interesting.
Yeah, no, it is. And then episode 49, Chris Moore. Again, another great story. Chris and his canine partner, Zico. Not only do they capture a capital murder suspect, they literally save a life because had they not deployed the dog, had the dog not been there, this guy would have been smoked by the SWAT team.
Absolutely, and that's what it's about. The police officers don't want, contrary to what you might believe, police officers do not want to kill people. That's not why you take the job. You take the vast, vast, vast majority of police officers take the job because they want to help others. There are bad apples in every career occupation in the world, including law enforcement, and those are the ones that get all the attention. Here's Chris doing his job and actually saves a defendant's life, a suspect's life that day. Great, fantastic story.
And then we end up with episode 50 in Pablo's Hippos, and I think that's where we'll end it for now. I mean, we went long. We wanted to really do just kind of cover the first 50 episodes, give you guys a perspective of all the people that we've talked. And you know what? We've talked so much. I don't think there's a need for us to do an outro here because it's me, Steve, and JP talking about it. You know what we're going to say? We're going to say just join us next week for the next episode of Game of Crimes. Follow us on Patreon, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We're going to tell you all that good stuff. We don't need to tell you again. So I think we will just close out with this by saying, Murph, are you ready now to play the biggest, baddest, most dangerous game of all, the original, unadulterated, and canine friendly Game of Crimes?
Absolutely, everyone. Get in, sit down, shut up, hold on, and let's find out about Pablo's hippos as well as Javier's little secret.
On the second floor.
There you go. See you guys.
This is a momentous episode. We should get somebody with a real good radio voice to talk about it. This is episode 50, episode 50 of Game of Crimes, and we thought, what better way to celebrate episode 50 of Game of Crimes than to bring back our senior agent in residence, Javier Pena, with Steve, and this time I will be the sole host of the program, and I will be interviewing Steve and JP because we want to talk about, well, we're going to talk about Pablo, obviously, but here's what we're going to talk about. Pablo, still to this day, obviously, big draw, Narcos Mexico. You guys keep getting interviewed about stuff, but there is one thing about Pablo, too, that people don't, I think, realize that he introduced into Colombia other than death and mayhem and cocaine, but that lives till today. And it's Pablo's Hippos. I
You know,
mean,
good. Everywhere you
who
go, people ask about Pablo's hippos.
Pablo's Hippos. So, JP, let's start off with you because you were down there first, but before Murph got there. I mean, did you have any clue at all that hippos were going to be such a big deal? And when's the first time you ran into one of Pablo's hippos or heard about them?
Great question. And not at all. You know what? As soon as he escaped, we took over the ranch. We raided the ranch. And matter of fact, I'll always remember I stayed, I think I spent like 5 nights there at the famous Finca Napoles at the ranch house.
Now,
So if
hey,
I could,
JP, did you sleep in that bed too, as well as the one in La Catedral?
no, no, not that one. I think I slept in some cot, some bullshit cot out there on the floor. But it was pretty cool. You know what? When I got there, I had never we had always heard of Finca Napoles, and we called his pride and joy. He loved his ranch. A finca in Colombia is a ranch, and the first thing that when you fly into it, you notice the airstrip. It's a giant airstrip, and that's where all the traffickers from Colombia, the United States, would come in and party with him. Anyway, so the first thing that astonished me is when I was there was the dinosaur park he had. I mean, real life, gigantic dinosaurs.
So, like
You know,
Jurassic Park?
like exactly like Jurassic Park. I mean, it was, and this were huge. They weren't just, they were, I don't know, 40, 50 feet high. He had built them to replica. And it was just, I guess he wanted all his kids to have fun in the dinosaur park. Then, like I said, then I saw I always remember a bullfighting ring. Who has a bullfighting ring in their ranch, right? And it was like a stadium, like professional built bullfighting ring stands, and I mean, I've Mexico has them, Spain has them. You've seen pictures, movies, but it was like a stadium bullfighting ring, and then, but you know what? When we were there, I was always noticing all this fancy birds, peacocks, toucans, just walking around, roaming around, and I was like, what are all this, you know, uh, exotic birds here? And then I think one of the cops, hey, wait till you go see the zoo, Javier. I said, what? He's got a zoo? And the zoo was enclosed with corral. It was a corral type zoo, wood beams, no real fences. It was just wood. And then I said, "Man, is that an elephant down there?" And it was like I always remember elephants. Like he had elephants. And then all of a sudden, and it was like a pasture. There was no cages, no barricade, just a wooden barricade, just like a corral. And then I started seeing, in fact, I was looking at my pictures, then I saw some zebras, uh, and then
This
some
sounds like a Sesame.
giraffes.
This sounds like a Sesame Street episode. Look at the
Yeah,
zebras and the
yeah,
lions
some zebras. There was no lions or tigers, not that I saw, and I'm
or bears. Oh my,
yeah,
yeah.
or bears, but water buffaloes, and then there was like a little lake area full of mud, and then I saw the famous hippos. They were in that mud, and then there's a. I just refreshed my memory. I saw a photo of one of the hippos. There's a like a cement trough, where he's eating a whole bunch of carrots. There's just carrots all over the place. The hippos, munching on the carrots, and it was like, how did he get in though? And then, oh yeah, let's not forget the rhinoceroses. So, and I'm not sure whatever happened with the rhinoceroses, right? I mean, I know that the hippos, that's part of our story, that they escaped, but he had rhinoceroses there also. So, but it was, like I said, a ranch style, no cages, just animals all roaming around. And I did not have an idea that the guy had animals on his ranch. So it was an eye opener. And you know what? But all those animals were just roaming around freely, eating, doing what they do best. The elephants, I have a picture. I'm petting one of them. I think I'm even feeding him. But like I said, the dinosaur park, it was just astonishing. And then, obviously, we get to the famous ranch house where he had all his meetings, his parties, and it was just an exotic building. Then the stories of all the parties and the meetings there at the ranch house. That was his. He loved his ranch house, and they took care of it. Yeah, go ahead.
Real quick, bookend for us too. At what point during the hunt for Pablo did he evacuate his ranch? Did he have to leave his ranch? I mean, so when you were down there the first time, was the Napoles active and stuff, or was it before or after La Catedral when he abandoned the ranch?
It was before La Catedral. It was before before he surrendered. He abandoned it. And the reason I remember this so clearly is because this is, like, I think, one of the first times in DEA history. Our purpose of going to the ranch and staging from there was, we interviewed a famous informant. The guy's dead now, but anyway, and I not making light of it, but this guy was Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha's right hand man. In the story, it's a great story. He wanted to talk to us, so we got permission, and we spent like 5 days talking to this guy. Gacha loved this guy. This guy loved Gacha. He's head of security. But when Gacha, Mexicano, Pablo's partner, gets killed, Pablo tells this guy, Henry, hey, you're going to work for me, because this guy was really good at security. And Henry told us he did not like Pablo. He hated Pablo because of all the people that he was killing. So, and Henry's famous in Colombia, like I said, because he was the leader of a paramilitary group there, and taking care of all of Jose Gonzalo Rodriguez Gacha's ranches. And Gacha, again, was Pablo's partner. Gacha was killed in 1989. So that was our purpose. And just real quick, I mean, this guy hated Pablo. He hated Pablo because of all the atrocities that he was doing. And, Pablo was trying to tell him what to do. So anyway, so he turned against Pablo, he was helping us out, and there was great information about the training camps in Colombia, about Pablo Escobar. So it was great information for me. And the reason I talk about this is that's why I was there at the ranch, and that's why we spent about 5 days there at Pablo's ranch. So basically, your question is, this was before he surrendered.
So Murph, I suppose you're going to take credit not only for Pablo surrendering, but for him leaving the ranch, because you showed up in country, right? And all of this stuff happens, or did that happen before you get there?
Well, he knew Javier was dead on his ass, so that's why he took off running. But when I got there, that's when oh shit, they got both of them now. That's our story, and we're sticking to it.
Yeah, okay. Well, so they're out. So when's the first time you visited Finca Napoles there, Murph?
It was after he'd escaped from prison, when Javi and I started living up with the cops there in Medellin during the final manhunt that lasted 18 months. And you would go out on missions with the Colombian National Police on the helicopters, and sometimes you would, they'd drop you off on a mountaintop, and you'd go on patrol all day long, and then they'd pick you up. And if you were over in that part of Antioquia, which is the state where Medellin is located, they would take you to Pablo's ranch because it had been converted into a police base. So, and this is kind of cool too. They had seizure laws in Colombia, but they didn't have forfeiture laws at the time. So they could use cars or ranches or whatever. But then, because there were no forfeiture laws, when they were worn out or no longer had a need for them, they would just vacate them. And I guess it could go back to the original owner, where the cars were all ragged out by then or wrecked. But and the nice thing about going there was at the police base where Javi and I were living, you got potatoes, rice, and maybe a piece of chicken 3 times a
Yeah,
day.
we talked about the rubber chicken in episode 1. Yes.
Yep. But if you were over at the base, you got a tough steak. So it was a variety.
Well, and how many? And so you started counting. Okay, there used to be 4 rhinoceroses. Now there are 3. This tastes a little weird. Doesn't taste like chicken. So,
It was good, but that's the first time I saw the animals.
so who was taking care of them? Were they just allowed to roam, or were the CNP, the National Police, taking care of them, feeding them? Who was responsible for that?
You know what? They had workers at the ranch at the famous Finca Napoles. They had workers, and I remember there was about 20 of them. Everybody had the job of cleaning, especially the waste from the animal, because they were just roaming around all over the place. And when we
Did you ever
interviewed
step
them,
into a huge hippo pie or a rhinoceros pie?
of course, they're all over the place, man. But I always remember that when you interview the workers, they were like, "Hey, we don't know who owns it. We just know someone comes once a month, brings us our monthly payment. We get paid, and we're happy with that." But they did not know that it was Pablo Escobar's zoo, the workers, because, like I said, they were just out there cleaning. They'd cook, they'd feed the guests, and but and I remembered also there was an old car, bullet riddled, and the rumors are that it belonged to Al Capone. Whether it did or not, we're not sure. But you know what? That's a great story. I mean, I'd believe it. If Pablo Escobar told me that was Al Capone's bullet riddled car, it was Al Capone's bullet riddled car.
Well, anybody who can smuggle 4 hippos into a country can surely smuggle 1 car.
Right, right. Yeah.
And he
And you
was
know
in the
what?
smuggling business too, wasn't he?
That's what
Mm,
they say.
a
I'm
little
really
bit.
not sure about that. But but also he was building other houses. It was just amazing. We took a tour. There was houses under construction. So it was just unbelievable. But I just, like I said, who had seen a bullfighting ring, like I said, just animals, and just what still in my mind is just roaming around freely, doing whatever they wanted, mingling with each other. Uh, and I think, like I said, I know that the hippos were eating a whole bunch of carrots. So
Yeah. So, Steve, while you were down there too, just from an animal standpoint, I mean, what did it look like to you the first time you showed up there and you see this stuff? Like, you see the dinosaurs and everything. Remind you, I mean, you're living close to Disney now. Was it like Disney in Colombia?
Well, it was definitely odd. Connie and we love going to zoos anywhere we live, and it was extremely unique. You hear the stories where drug traffickers will buy a lion or a jaguar or something like that, just to be different. And I think that's why Pablo did it. He just, it was another example of, I've got so much money, look how I can just piss it away. And went and bought all these exotic animals. But it was pretty cool to go in there because I don't know that I'd ever seen a rhino at that time. And here's one, I've got a great picture of one standing there broadside. Um, I was a little surprised. I never saw any monkeys there. Did you, JP?
yeah, there were. I remember
Oh,
now,
were there?
and this were in a cage, so it was an enclosed. I remember the monkeys, a whole bunch of them. And you know what? We did not take pictures of them, but he had monkeys there. Yes.
And we were there one time. Actually, I was there with JP one time. I don't remember what we were doing. I guess we were meeting the
Yeah,
cops
it's been
there,
something here.
and saw the peacocks walking around, but they
Yeah,
didn't have the beautiful tails. They were I didn't see any that had the tails. They were it's like the feathers had fallen off, so it looked like they weren't being taken really good care of. But like JP said, there were toucans running around everywhere, and
yeah, yeah,
you saw camels. I mean, just you saw the oddest
yeah.
things there. You know.
So give us an idea size wise. I mean, did you acre wise? Do you know how big it was? Do you know how big was the Finca Napoles?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of stories, but I think it was more like 10,000 acres. I remember that figure's always been in my head when the cop said, and he was buying land all around there. In building, like I said, he had a beautiful house going up. It wasn't close to Napoles. I mean, it was in the area. I'm saying I remember about a couple of miles away because we had to take the chopper out there, and it was a brand new house that they were building. So he was expanding on it, and but the main ranch houses, and I think there is where we found pictures of Pablo and his buddies. I remember they were on a bench on the second floor. Pablo's without a shirt, and two of his friends there. And well, Morgan, I don't know if I can mention this, but I'm going to mention it. Something kind of unique that's always stuck in my mind on the second floor. I think I can
Uh-oh.
mention it, right? He had a sex swing.
Oh,
You
there
know
you
what?
go.
At that time, you would see pictures, you would hear, "What the hell's a sex swing?" So I remember,
How
and
did
it
you
was,
know it was a sex
well,
swing,
that's why
Javier?
I
And
said
exactly where did you stay when you were staying
I
at
am
Finca
not going
Napoles?
to compromise. I am not going to compromise my integrity on that. But I've been told it was a sex swing, and that even the cops, it was like a regular swing, and it had a. Believe me, it was a sex swing. Yeah, I remember it was on the second floor. So anyway, I just throw that out there. So, he loved that house. He loved that main house, and I said we got pictures with it. Had a swimming pool, a lot of stories about the parties, but that I mean that like and Steve says it best. You know what? He was just showing off to other traffickers, and later on we found out that American pilots would come in, and they'd meet with him at his famous Finca Napoles, and it was this other traffickers. Remember, you would tell somebody, you would say, I got invited to Pablo Escobar's Finca Napoles. I mean, that was a glory. That was bragging rights for the rest of your life if you got invited to Pablo Escobar's ranch.
Hey, Steve and Murph, episode 2, when we talked to George Young, did George Young not meet Pablo out at Finca Napoles?
He says he did, but when I asked him to describe it, his description of where it was located didn't match where it's really located. He said it was really close to the city of Medellin. I mean, if we flew out there by Hilo, it was probably a 30-minute flight.
Yeah, at
Okay.
least a 30-minute. And remember, he had other ranches. I mean, he had tons of ranches
Yeah.
near Medellin, so it could have been another one. And, there, I mean, but Napoles, and if you look at why he named the Finca Napoles, right? I mean, it's an Italian name, correct?
It's like
Napoles?
Napoli,
Yeah,
from
yeah.
Italy.
Right, right. And remember, he loved Italian architects. But I mean, it's a great name, and
It is.
at the beginning, he had an airplane right over the gate of Fincanópolis, and
Yeah, that very famous picture. Yeah. Hey, let's talk about I wanted to go back real quickly for a second. You talked about the workers were getting paid and the money was coming in. They didn't know who it was come from. Do you know who was paying the workers every month?
nah, I do not. He had different people, but and that'd be the same scenario at houses he was building. When you'd interview him, said, "No, hey, a guy just shows up with money once a month. We get paid. We're happy." And that was the regular mo. That
Okay.
you would hear that story 99% of the time. I don't know who owns it. We just get paid. We work here.
So how long did you operate out of Finca Napoles, during this time? Was it until he was killed, or at some point did you guys migrate and move away from the Finca?
No, we stayed there pretty much until the end of the manhunt. And we didn't stay there, but I mean, it was occupied by the Colombian National Police. They had created a base there for that part of the country. And if you recall, America's Most Wanted came down and did one episode only of the world's most wanted. And Javier we took him up to Medellin for a week. Took him in Hacienda Napoles. Actually set a roadblock out in front of the entrance there for a very short time, and took him into the little town close by where they could get some film footage. But it was with the stipulation, we had a full police escort, truckloads of police officers, and they said, "Listen, you got 10 minutes, and then we got to go because within 15 or 20 minutes they can mount an operation and then attack us out here." So it was, this is very pro Escobar territory out there.
Well, is it still?
Yeah, I mean, right now, what I hear, I mean, it's pretty much abandoned. But what I hear, like I said, after Escobar gets killed, the police vacated the ranch, and I don't know who came in from the government to try to take it over, or I think what they did, what U.S. Marshals do, they hire caretakers for it, right, to care for it. They were supposed to turn it into a big museum type ranch, and that never happened because it is kind of far, and it is a lot of FARC and AUC people, the paramilitary, the FARC are still out there. So it was a little bit on the dangerous side, and in fact, people will not drive there because I mean, you are going to be
Going
you
through
know
the Badlands.
yeah, Badlands. That is correct. Yeah.
So, Steve, let's go back to what you were talking about. So, John Walsh came down there with his crew to
Mhm.
film for a week. I mean, so one thing we all have in common, we've all met John Walsh,
Well, he didn't come. He didn't come. He sent a producer and the film
Oh,
crew.
he didn't come down.
No, I don't. You remember
So
that
what did he
guy's
do?
name?
Green
JP?
screen it or something? Or
No, the producer. He was the mouthpiece of the show. He was the host, or I don't even know what you call that person. He was the one that was on camera, and we would point things out to him. We'd take him to different places. I remember one time we were in Medellin, and a report came in of a bombing going off in one of the barrios. So we all jumped into police cars and hauled butt out there, and they got some footage out there where a building had been blown up by Escobar's associates.
oh, okay. I thought
Yeah,
he may
so
have been down there because I know he had gone to, I think, Mexico a couple times or some other places. Putting on the helmet and the vest. Obviously trying to create drama. But
mhm.
I mean, so they made a TV show. Had anything come out of it at all? They just put it on there, like say they're looking for him, and no leads, no nothing out of it.
I'm sure some leads came in because everybody wanted that reward money, but nothing legitimate.
Right. And also, you know what? Let's not forget, and I think Steve and I were interviewed for this one too, is that Brits mercenaries had been hired, and this is around 1988. British mercenaries had been hired by the Cali cartel to go kill Pablo, attack him at his famous ranch, Napoles. And in fact, there's a lot of stuff on that where they planned the operation. It was financed by the Cali cartel, and but they had intelligence. They had pinpointed him. He was at the ranch, and it was about what? Remember, Steve? It was about 30, 40 guys, Brit mercenaries.
Yeah, it was 2 helicopters worth, I believe, and one of the helicopters crashed,
Right. And
if I
that
remember
is a
right.
fact that it did crash, and they basically the operation was nixed, but they were going to try to kill Pablo at his ranch. I mean, they tried. The operation started. The chopper crashed, and I think the terrain was difficult. The flying conditions were difficult. So, but and I think some of the Brits were stuck out there in mountains, right? I mean,
Yeah, there was a few of them that were killed, and there was a couple from that crashed helicopter that were able to get out, 1 or 2. I think that's all that survived.
Now, did he take any countermeasures down at Finca Napoles like he did at La Catedral to prevent the landing of helicopters? And maybe that's where he learned his lessons from, right? Because you told me, right, he put posts and stuff up to prevent helicopters from landing on
Mhm.
the grounds.
Yeah, I don't remember seeing anything at the ranch. Do you, JP?
no, nothing at the ranch. But I basically the story is that the sicarios had been trained by the Israeli mercenaries how to take care of the ranch, and that is true. The Israeli mercenaries were the ones who trained. Pablo Sicarios, Gotcha Sicarios. However, if you listen to some of the British mercenaries, they say they were way ahead of the sicarios. It's better trained than the
Yeah.
sicarios, and I believe that.
Yeah.
Yeah. You have to train for a long time to get to that level. And I think they were just trying to gear up for that operation. But as we said, this episode is about Pablo's hippos. So let me ask you a hippo question. Um,
Okay.
did those are dangerous little sons of bitches, man.
You're not kidding.
How close? So Murph, let's start with you. How close did you come? Did you get right up close to one of those hippos, or did you keep your distance?
I've got, in fact, we show the photograph in our presentation when we speak to audiences. I've got one of the hippo inside his pen, eating from a concrete trough, like Javier was describing to you. And then I also remember one time we were there, and I could see there was a big water pit there inside the pen for them, and they were both the two that I saw were in the water. You could see just their back sticking out a little bit. And every once in a while, you'd see their eyes peek above the water. They'd look around, and then they'd duck back under the water. So that was plenty close enough for me. When you're looking at those pins, and it's wood fencing. It's like it's like a regular fencing you'd see on a ranch. I'm thinking
It's like if
these bad boys weighing 3 tons, they could push that fence over anytime they wanted to. There was
and
nothing.
they are
There was no steel
deceptively
reinforcement.
yeah, and they're deceptively fast. I mean, I used to watch Wild Kingdom with Marlon Perkins. I've watched the
Oh yeah.
dangerous Jim attack the dangerous anaconda. But so let me ask you a question though about the hippos, because there is a tie-in back to Narcos.
Hmm.
Because remember when they were kind of setting the stage now for Narcos Mexico, they went back in time. They had to get the episode with Pablo and the hippos. Let's talk about that for a minute, because that is so iconic. I mean, that was, to me, that was one of the great shots out of that episode, was just the fact that they went back in time and there it was, Pablo's hippos.
Well, and I'm thinking of a scene where one of the Mexicans had gone down when they had made the deal with the Cali cartel. This is in Narcos Mexico, so this is TV. I don't know if it's true or not. They go down, and then Pablo finds out that they kidnapped the Mexican, and then he has to go meet Pablo because what the hell are you doing business with the Cali for? Because those are my enemies. If those are my enemy and you're their friend, that makes you my enemy. And remember, they're talking to him on a like a little bridge, and there's a gazebo there,
Yeah.
and a couple of the sicarios are standing off the side. Oh, it might have been. No, it wasn't him. I can't remember which character it was now. But anyway, there were noises off in the background, and he said, "What's that?" And they said, "That's hippos screaming." And the implication was that there's hippos in the water. And throughout the conversation, uh, the guy asked Pablo at the end. He said, "What would have happened if you didn't believe me?" And he said, "I'd push you in the water with the hippos." So that's the reference I remember. And what the research that we've done, like you said, you can't outrun a hippo. If you're running a straight line, a hippo can catch you, and
Oh
you
man,
certainly
yeah.
can't outswim the damn things.
No, I mean, it's so, yeah, the only thing you can do is just not get around them little things in the first place. And I think I was pulling it up here too. It was episode 5 in Narcos Mexico, I think season 1. But it's like, but I was watching that, and it's like, just the thing is that, like you say, Steve, how do we know? I don't know if it's true or not. We decided that with Narcos itself, it's
Right.
about a third, a third, and a third. But the fact is that the hippos were down there. And so let me ask you, let's work into a little bit more of Pablo's hippos. Let me ask you this. Because speaking of smuggling, it's one thing to smuggle kilos of coke because you can wrap them up. They don't think, So think about this. How the hell do you smuggle 3 females and 1 male hippo into the country of Colombia and take them all the way down to Finca Napoles? I mean, let's talk. How could this have been accomplished?
A lot of money, yeah, a lot of bright money. Hey, remember, money moves the world. You know what? That's a great question, and I don't think anybody really came up with the answer on how they were smuggled into Colombia. I mean, we've heard stories where they hired people, but I guess via boat vessel at the ports you could buy off anybody. So then just ship
Mhm.
them via trucks, and if you say they belong to Pablo Escobar, money's been paid. Who's going to question? But the fact is that they were there. So how
Yeah.
did you get them there? That's a great question.
You know what? I don't know if you're aware of this, Morgan, but gosh, way back in our careers, Javier and I both still on the job. Animal Planet did an episode on Pablo's hippos. This was years ago. We could probably look it up here on Google and see when that was. But so we both flew up to DEA headquarters in Washington for these interviews. And hell, I don't know anything about hippos. And so we're talking, and the producer educated us on that. They said, here's the issue with Pablo's hippos is that in Africa, hippos reproduce on average once every 3 years because of the lack of water and vegetation there, because it's a very arid, dry environment. Well, in Colombia, you don't have that problem because where they were, it was very lush, it was very green. There was rivers everywhere, lakes, plenty of water for them, plenty for them to eat. They don't eat meat. They're I guess you call it vegetarian. I don't know if that's what you call an animal that only eats plants, but they don't eat meat. And so these puppies are reproducing every year.
They're a herbivore.
There you go. So, and like you said, I mean, they went from 4 hippos, and the most recent thing I read was what you said, that there's approximately 130 hippos now in that part of Colombia.
Well, I just found the one. It doesn't show on Animal Planet when the episode was, but it shows it. It says drug kingpin hippos. Animal Planet's 1 hour special drug kingpin hippos explores cocaine king Pablo Escobar's decades-long stronghold on Colombia and the lasting threat his hippos continue to pose to the country today. And that's the other part I wanted to get into. So I did a little bit of research, pulled up a couple articles here. People talked about it, but this, I mean, no less than the Washington Post, so it has to be true, right? But they did a whole series on it, but they said Pablo Escobar's hippos are the world's largest invasive species.
I believe it. I believe it. It's, and as we're doing our research for today's recording, it's amazing to hear the opposing sides on what to do about this. Because on the one hand, this invasive species now is changing the ecological system in the area where they live, because they primarily live in water. And so their feces, when they're taking a dump, is killing the vegetation in the water, which leads to a lack of oxygen, which is killing the fish. So it's changing the ecological system down there.
I know a few guys who had that same problem too. I followed them into the bathroom. I think they did the same thing.
Especially when you're out in those base camps. But
who died in here? Oh my God! Yeah.
And you got to remember where Colombia's relation is, or where its geographic location is on the Earth. It's very close to the equator. I think it's roughly 3 degrees off the equator. So it's causing a major ecological issue down there. But then you look at the opposing parties involved in this. I mean, if it's causing that kind of problems, we can figure out real quick how, because we're not doves, we're hawks. We can figure out how to take care of this issue. You would go down and kill them. Well, the animal rights people, they get involved. And then I started reading articles about some of the people that live there with the hippos, and they're not in favor of getting rid of them. These are not animals that you domesticate and become your puppy dog or your kitty cat. These are very territorial animals who will protect, especially if they have a little one, will protect to do anything that they have to do to protect their young, to protect their territories. Now, from all the evidence I can find, there have been no deaths in Colombia from the hippos, but there were reports of 3 attacks by the hippos on people. One guy was talking about just being out in his boat fishing, and he got too close, and they went over, bumped the boat, and dumped him in the water, and he swam for his life. So it's just amazing to see. Well, then here in the United States, I don't know if you probably have read this about now the hippos can be recognized as humans.
October 26th, 2021, a federal judge ruled that drug kingpin Pablo Escobar's hippos can be recognized as people or interested persons with legal rights in the U.S. following a federal court order. Now,
so I've got so many questions on that.
Well, it doesn't carry any water or any weight down in Colombia,
Exactly.
Now,
so
however,
here's
I do want
ugly Americans sticking their nose in again.
But here's the other headline I want to read you too, because we talk about how do you control this population now? Well, one way is you kill them, right? And that caused some issues, right? Efforts to castrate hippos are not as easy as you would think. No shit, Sherlock. You try, you try holding one of those things still while you pull out a sharp knife and
Grab
see
his
what
legs.
happens
Grab
to
his
you, pal.
legs. Javier, get the other leg.
Yeah, I'd like to see how that's. I'd like to see how they're going to do
Nah,
that. Yeah.
I know. Yeah, and what I followed, it's very controversial right now. I mean, both of y'all are right. What are we going to do? How do we stop them? The animal rights people says no. They're part of our land now. And I mean, I know that no names will be mentioned, but I have this friend of mine who was hired when this happened. He was a big safari guy. He down in Colombia to shoot one. You know, he's used to safaris, and wow, what I heard afterwards, people wanted to kill the guy, for shooting it, and he was authorized by the government. So I think he killed one, and it was mayhem. The guy had to go into hiding. So, but it is a big, what are we going to do with the hippos? I mean, they're animals. They're part of the environment now. So how do you? And I know I saw something where they got all sorts of animal people, experts. The scientific people looking at how to stop the herd.
Well,
Well,
so a little bit more research, real quick, before you say that. So you would think a hippo is a pretty good sized animal, right?
oh
So
yeah.
it takes a basically a potent elephant tranquilizer before it was safe to approach it. So how easy do you think it is to find the parts?
Well, I read about that too, and they're not external; they're internal. That's why you have to tranquilize them because you have
It's
to
like a
cut through the
turtle.
skin.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So they said it's not that easy. Even if you wanted to castrate them, it's not that easy to find the appropriate plumbing to, alter the path of the um, injection site.
Well, and, too, I remember seeing a documentary. Maybe it was Animal Planet, the same show we were on. I'm not sure, but it showed the Colombians going in to try to castrate one of the hippos. And it was a major, major, major operation. And they're bringing in helicopters to relocate the thing so they can work on it. And I forget how many darts they had to shoot into it to finally get it tranquilized. It was an outrageous operation. And then it was so heavy that the helicopter they were using to lift it up, the motor started overheating on that. And now you're risking human lives for this animal. And I love animals. I'm not against these guys, but I mean, what's more important, a human life or the animal's life?
Well,
So yeah,
depends on who you ask.
that's exactly right. Because I'm reading here, I got to read this two sentences to you from this local conservationist in Colombia, and she says they make laws from a distance. We live with the hippopotamuses here, and we never even thought of killing them. The hippopotamuses aren't African now; they're Colombians.
Well, but now let me read you a couple sentences.
Okay.
Whereas most African communities are justifiably leery of hippos, the creatures kill more people annually than any other large mammal. Their
Yep.
Colombians' neighbors are captivated by them. Gift shops in nearby Puerto Triunfo sell hippo keychains and T-shirts.
Yep.
I
So
tell you what'll
and
happen.
nothing.
They'll learn.
They're not exactly. They're not going to change their minds until a young child or some innocent person is killed by a hippo, and then the first couple they're going to blame it on the people. But then once they don't eat meat, so they're not attacking you to eat you. They're not going to just because of hunger. But it's going to. I mean, it's the same thing here in the United States. Something bad has to happen to typically a politician's family member before problems get addressed.
Yeah. Well, kind of use an animal analogy. It depends on whose ox is getting gored or whose hippo is, attacking you before you do that. But
Exactly.
it's one of those things. Let me ask you from the philosophical standpoint, though, too, JP. I mean, think about this. We have the person who is probably one of the most murderous people on the planets in history. I mean, you could compare him with heads of nations like Stalin and Pol Pot, and folks like that. And yet, to this day, Pablo Escobar's footprint, in a sense, can still be felt. I mean, I hate to call it a legacy, but it's like, how ironic is it that somebody who's been dead for a long time since, what day was that, Murph?
December 2nd, 1993.
Yeah, so we're going on the 30-year anniversary. Next year will be the 30th anniversary of that. And yet 30 years later, this guy gets talked about as often as former presidents, or figures in history, Winston Churchill. I mean, frickin' ironic is that?
Yeah, and you know what? We've always heard, "Oh, Pablo Escobar was a Robin Hood," right? And now I don't know what he's going to be called because his legacy is he brought in the hippos into Colombia, and now the hippos are doing whatever they want to do in Colombia. And like I think Steve has said, the animal people are saying, you know what? They have a right to be here. So that's the legacy. Again, another legacy of Pablo Escobar is his hippos. Who would have thought? I never would have thought that they would have escaped and multiplied like they have right now. When we left Colombia, and I thought, the hippos, they'll be placed in some sort of zoo. We would do the same thing right here in the U.S. if we got a couple of animals. I know some of the traffickers here in the U.S. have bought tigers, and what do? Law enforcement will come in and place them in a zoo. So, but I never realized that the hippos had escaped. And now in the hundreds, and as we talk right now, they're still multiplying, and they're going to be around. So that's Pablo Escobar's legacy.
Well, and Steve, to add to what you were saying too, I just pulled this up too. This is actually they did a 2020. This is as of 2020. They did a study of hippo inhabited lakes and found that the nutrients in the animal's feces, just what you were saying, were fueling huge blooms of bacteria and algae. These in turn reduce the oxygen content of water, making it toxic to fish. According to one of the experts, they say we saw oxygen levels that were getting to levels where you would expect to see fish to start go belly up.
Hmm.
And they're concerned that this will affect the fishing industry. So, I mean, kind of one of those questions is that you have something that's been introduced into an area that was not native there. It was never designed to be there.
Right.
And now Pablo has screwed over Colombia once again.
That's what, and that's we point this out in our presentations, and Javier hit the nail on the head there just a second ago. Here's a guy that been dead almost 30 years, and he's still causing death and destruction in our world today. Was that in his overall plan when he brought these exotic animals into Colombia? I'm going to guess no, it was. I probably never even gave it a second thought, but that's the point. He never gave a thought about anybody else but himself. I mean, this guy's ego was just uncontrollable. We know about his political career that didn't last too long, but this is a guy 2 different times offered to pay off the national debt of Colombia. It would have been with narco dollars, and we all know that. But I mean, that's how out of control this guy is. And it's not only in Colombia. We have photographs of narco planes that they flew cocaine up into the Bahama Island chain. They crashed them in the water, got the cocaine off, but they did. They left the plane still had aviation fuel on there. They still had hydraulic
everything,
fluid.
yeah.
They had oils, and we all know salt water fatigues metal and causes it to rust. So, you've got these caustic liquids coming out, killing the reefs and the wildlife down there as well. It just it's like there's no end to the destruction he's causing, even all these years later. That's just, and you know what? That's the legacy he needs to have, is how murderous he was and continues to cause death in our world today.
So let me ask you about a name, see if you guys recognize it. Edgar Jimenez.
Edgar Jimenez. Doesn't ring a bell.
Pablo's personal photographer. So this is the guy that put together a collection of photos. He was asked, Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar, smiling glass, they got a picture of him here, but he was asked to the head of the notorious Medellin cartel told Jimenez he was looking for a photographer to create a registry of the giraffes, hippos, elephants, and camels that roamed his private zoo. Jimenez agreed to help. He would end up working as the drug lord's personal family photographer for the better part of a decade, shooting pictures of First Communion weddings and stuff. So that this Edgar Jimenez went out and actually, that's where a lot of the pictures I think you see come from this dude taking pictures for Pablo.
Yeah, I read an article about him not long ago.
Yeah, but I don't remember him. But we also took photos, and we have our own photos of Pablo's animals.
That's true.
Yeah, well, but Pablo didn't invite you to his communions and his parties, though. You guys crashed his party. That's why he was mad.
Yeah. I remember. Yeah, in fact, I saw the other day. I still had a video of Pablo's son at a birthday party. Oh man, it's just lavish. It's just unbelievable for a young kid to throw a party with smoke filled drinks, bands. I mean, it was just he'd go all out for parties, and like he did at his ranch, went all out. And now we see the results. But you know what? If they would have taken care, here we are. If right Monday morning quarterback, but what if the government would have done something as soon as the animals? Would we still have that problem or not?
Well, but you bring up an interesting point too, because as you do the further research on this and stuff, it's not an option. People say, "Well, just take them back to Africa." Africa doesn't want them. They have no idea what's wrong with them, and like you were saying, Steve. Reason they didn't reproduce is because these guys are fighting over puddles of water, and they have some predators too. And so as you get weaker, you get subjected. You become more vulnerable to predators. Whereas, as you were saying, JP, down there it's lush, it's lavish. These guys are now. I mean, this is like living on, the high life and steak and everything, 7 days a week instead of little crackers and
Right.
olives tossed your way, as party favors.
Right. They're in paradise. They are in paradise. I mean, the food out there, the natural vegetation, the water, the lush, and like that photo shows. I mean, there's that cement trough. I mean, I don't know. It's got to be 500 carrots. Who can afford all this food for the animals? Pablo Escobar could, so he fed them as much as he could. And like I said, when they broke away in that Puerto Triunfo area, which you mentioned, it's very jungle-like, a lot of water and a lot of vegetation. So they have it made right now.
So, just out of curiosity, I wanted to see how many search results there were for Pablo Escobar hippos. Without Googling, Steve, don't check. How many search results do you think there are just for that phrase, Pablo Escobar hippos?
Oh, it's got to be tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions.
Oh, oh my, you exaggerate a little bit. It's about 300,000 though.
Oh, that's all?
Yeah, but that's only for that specific phrase though. So I think if you go look, but still, 300,000 stories that have the word Pablo Escobar and hippos in there, or 300,000 links. I mean, again, just think about the enduring legacy that this has left. And I don't say legacy in a nice way. Legacies can be bad, but this thing is something that he brings them in, he allows them to roam around. But I like well, I don't know if I say like, but some of the headlines called them Pablo Escobar's cocaine hippos.
Yeah, I've
Pablo's
heard that.
hippos.
And that is true. They're Pablo's cocaine hippos. I like that term. You brought them in, paid for them with cocaine money, right?
Yeah,
Boy,
I
did
think I
he.
just found here the Animal Planet special was on in 2011.
And so, but you guys were on that.
Of course. Hey, if you made Animal Planet, brother, you've made it in the
You've
movie
made it.
world,
No,
right?
no wonder they signed you up for Narcos. Oh, I'm sorry, they didn't sign you up for Narcos. They had to get real actors. Any other impacts from that too? I mean, the hippos seem to be the biggest part of that whole animal legacy that he had. Did you guys see? I mean, in other words, down there, did they adopt some of those animals out? Did they ship them out while you guys were there? I mean, at some point, you couldn't just sit there and if you're trying to run a military base or police base, you couldn't have all these animals running around, could you?
No, you could not. And I just remember that they hired. I mean, they kept the workers to feed them. Government was paying for the food, but you know what? I am not sure after we left. Where did the giraffes go? Where did the elephants go? They didn't break out, so I'm sure they were placed in some sort of zoo type environment in Colombia. But I think because the hippos pretty much I think escaped, and at that point there's like, hey, how do we try to capture one of this? You can't. So I think that the other animals were placed in like I said, animal type zoo type conditions.
And there's one article that shows a projection. If they don't do anything about it in 8 years, there's projected to be as many as 400 hippos down there.
Well,
Let's
funny you
just
should
wait
mention
till the
that.
problem gets unattainable, unsolvable, and then we'll address it.
Well,
like the
funny you
United
should mention
States.
that too. Maybe out of the same article, because as of February of this year, February of 2022, Colombia is set to declare hippos an invasive species,
Mhm.
which means that they will have new authorities. Hey, maybe maybe there will be a new manhunt, and maybe it's Narcos Animal Planet. And JP Murph, you guys can go down there and find out who's the kingpin of the hippos.
There you go. Well, we have to take an elephant gun. I'm afraid if I shoot that, I might break a shoulder.
Well, hell, you just got back from the doctor getting your eyes dilated. You might not even be able to see the target, even as big as a hippo.
Plus,
I'll
you
tell
may
you, all I
not
see
come
right
back
now is a bunch of.
alive. You may not come back alive on that one, Steve, if you shoot a
Yeah, you're not
hippo.
kidding, brother. You're not kidding. Those puppies will become meat eaters.
Yeah.
Oh, you're the two guys that killed our dad.
We're going to hunt you down. But here's another interesting thing, though, too, I found out about the hippos. Why they have natural predators in Africa, they have no natural predators in Colombia.
Mhm.
And that's why, to your point, both of you guys' point, they were allowed to grow and survive and thrive. And their numbers are swelling like that, Steve. I mean, if 130 are bad, how bad will 400 be?
Exactly. And I got to go back to that. The one point where, an animal rights activist here in the United States got a court to recognize Colombian hippos as people. First of all, why are you sticking your nose in their damn business? I know you're an animal rights activist, and you're worried about what'll happen to the animals, but shouldn't you do that in Colombia, where the legal jurisdiction venue is, not here in the United States, where it just sounds like a freaking joke? And if you read into this, if you read a little bit further into that, things like this have been tried before in the United States, and judges have ruled that it's ludicrous, it's ridiculous, it's invasive to try to compare animals to to people. It, but here we got one federal magistrate judge said, "Okay, yeah, hippo, yeah, that's the same as my grandchild."
Yeah.
It's-
Well, how many grandchildren kill more people each year than lions, hyenas, and crocodiles combined? That's the estimates from Africa. And
Yep.
if this document is signed, here's what happens in Colombia. When the document declaring them as an invasive species in Colombia is signed, hippopotamuses will join species such as the giant African snail, the coqui frog, black tilapia, and lionfish. The declaration will allow the government to allocate resources to control the hippo population. One of the main obstacles. But you know what the other obstacle is? They say that hippopotamuses do not have what is called obvious sexual dimorphism.
Mhm.
I don't know. That sounds fancy to me. What it means is it's difficult to know if they're male or female because, as you pointed out, Murph, their genitals are internal,
Yep.
so they're all up and down the Magdalena River. So, did you go swimming in the Magdalena River at all?
Oh, hell no.
I've been there, fished in there, but it's a very famous river in Colombia, the Magdalena.
Yeah, I flew over it. That's as close as I got to it.
Well, but they said nobody's been killed yet, but yet the attacks are increasing. So one of the people that they interviewed for this article was in a boat, got too near a female, which had just had a baby, got
Mhm.
overturned, and another guy who says, "Oh, I don't mind the hippos." He was grabbed by one of them, grabbed, thrown through the air, busted his hip and his leg, and he's like, "Oh, I'm fine with that." Like to your point, how long will it be before there are enough hippos down there to where they start attacking people? What about the people who have to fish on the river that can't? What about the fish that can't survive in the river anymore? I mean, this is just, the sad part is here again, 30 years later, the dude has been dead. Shocker,
Mhm.
spoiler, if you haven't watched Narcos, Pablo dies. Um, 30 years later, he is still killing things.
Yeah, and there's even one of those articles I was reading and it was talking about that little town, I think it's Puerto Triunfo,
Triunfo, yeah. That's close to
and
the
they're talking
ranch.
about occasionally the hippos just come and walk down the street, and when that happens, life stops in that town because nobody wants to get attacked by a hippo. Well, how friendly is that? It just the arguments that are being made, I think, are just outrageously ridiculous. Um, but so is our world right now.
Right. Bottom line is Colombia has to do something about the hippo problem.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
It comes down, what's more important, a hippo or a human life?
yeah. Well, and that's going to be the big thing, right? What are we going to do with them? So, we just wanted to do just kind of a quick. I'd say quick. It's only going to be about an hour long. It's not going to be like our regular long form, but this
Mhm.
is one of the most interesting things I think that is not that well known about Pablo. But I mean, people talk about it, but we all know about Pablo. But so let's just kind of do final takeaways. I mean, because what I want to ask you about is this is the thing that fascinated me about this story. And Steve and I've asked both you and JP this thing. Why is it that 30 years later we are still talking about Pablo Escobar?
Go ahead, JP.
Yeah, go ahead.
That's the
Well,
same question we've had.
yeah, we've asked it. And you know what? And when we do our shows, everybody has heard of Pablo Escobar. Pablo Escobar, we've talked about it. We say we hope we dispel that Robin Hood myth. He killed about 50,000 people, but it's something that Pablo Escobar brought to Colombia. I mean, besides the violence, besides the sending of dope, besides the terrorism he accomplished by the downing of the commercial airline buildings, presidential candidates. But this is something that he created. And when you mention Pablo Escobar's Hippos, it's he created this, and the problem is there, and it's going to continue being a problem. And he was brought on by Pablo Escobar.
Yeah, and it's we had the same question, Morgan. In fact, excuse me, when we first started talking to Eric Newman about the Netflix series Narcos, we turned him down, and he asked us why. We said nobody's interested in this guy, and that was in early 2013, and he was killed in '93, so that was 20 years later. And maybe we were naive about it, and so we've had discussions with others about that since that time, and they'll say, well, why do people follow Adolf Hitler? Why are they interested in knowing about him? Well, Javier and actually Javier says this at our presentations when we get up to the introduction. This is a lesson in history. Why do we study history to start with? Well, ostensibly we study history to learn from our mistakes so that we don't make the same mistakes again, right? But the truth is, we study history and we forget about it. We make the same damn mistakes over and over and over again. So um, I don't have an answer why people are still drawn to Pablo. I don't know. It's this myth, this legend that he's created or his family's created or whatever. It's for people out there that are anti-government. It's a great story for them. I'll be honest with you. I don't like being told what to do either. I'm a little bit not offended, but if you tell me what to do, I'm probably going to step back and think about it. I'm not going to do it just because you said I have to do it.
Oh, you
So
do too, Murph. Yeah, I mean, you're pig-headed. You're like, I'm not going to do that.
It could be, but that's why I think that Pablo is so popular still to this day.
I get why Elvis is popular. I mean, he died young. Marilyn Monroe, same thing. We talk about them. I just have a hard time wrapping my head around why. But it's the same thing, though. We talk about. We just did a Patreon episode, which is dropping a case of the month on Vicky White and Casey White. And why do women? Look, I saw a great meme, but it says women, or here's a public service announcement. You are not going, if somebody is inside prison doing time, chances are they are not your soulmate.
They might be your cellmate.
Cellmate, but they are not your soulmate, right? And so it is this whole, I think part of it is driven by myth. People enjoy mythology of some type. Joseph Campbell wrote that whole book called The Hero's Journey. They based Star Wars about the hero's journey, and it's really broken down. So I think people enjoy this myth, but I think the biggest, thing out of this that I think I don't want to say it's shameful in that way, but to me it's disheartening. Is to your point, Steve, you were talking about there are a generation of people growing up that don't realize that this guy killed tens of thousands of people, and yet he is mythologized, if that's a word, into being this larger than life person. And when you hear stories about things like Pablo's Hippos, it almost just reinforces that, because somebody who has no context for what went on, that was born, only 20 years ago, they're going to go, oh, that's cool. Hippos. That's like exotic. That's wild, man. And not realizing that those hippos, guess what, were brought into Colombia because of the narco dollars that he was making off of killing, lots of other people.
Well, Javier, tell him what's the most popular tourist attraction?
Yeah, most popular tourist attraction in Medellin is Pablo Escobar's gravesite. People line up to go see his gravesite. Number one tourist attraction.
We've got photographs when he was killed, and his body was in a casket in a funeral home. Public broke into the funeral home and paraded his casket out in the street, opened it up and everything.
Well, you know what? And I got to admit, I've been to his gravesite too. So I'm one of those.
Yeah. You just went there to make sure that he was still there. He didn't escape this. All right. So it's like El Chapo. Is he still in ADX, Florence? Yes, he is. Yeah. He's not going anywhere.
Well,
All
too,
right.
it's
So
like, Morgan, you're aware that Javier and I get hate mail through
no,
social
Steve, you don't get
media.
hate mail. You get people who don't clearly understand history.
Apparently, but and I guess it just goes with the territory. But and we don't respond to that crap. But I would love to, because I would love to know the ages of the people that are sending it to us, because I'm pretty sure most of them weren't even alive when Pablo was killed, and they have no idea of who that is they're trying to support all these years later, a mass murderer.
And they do not know what he did. That is a great point. Blowing up a commercial airline.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, now, Steve, the other thing too, you did get a piece of hate mail recently where somebody watched Narcos and believed Narcos is totally true, and they got mad at you for what was on Narcos.
Me and Javier, I didn't even tell Javier about it yet. Javier, why are you not in prison? You were given classified information to Los Pepis. I saw it on TV. I saw, jeez. Oh,
Oh,
and
okay.
I wrote out a response to that one because it was so ridiculous, and
We
it's still
talked
my
about that.
draft. It's still my draft.
Yeah, you sat on that for a while. I mean, it's like, you just need to send him the Ron White picture that said, "Son, there's just no fixing stupid."
Yeah, that's crazy.
Well, so hey guys, what we want to do. So this is our celebratory 50th episode of Game of Crimes. This has been a fun ride, you guys. We kicked it off with JP and Murph, and we're kicking off, the next 50 with these guys as well. And hopefully, you guys have enjoyed this. This one's not going to be like our traditional where we went in depth,
Mhm.
but we thought would take a topic, a lot of fascination around Pablo's Hippos. And let me just final thoughts from you guys too. Now, like Murph, we're about a year into this, but you guys have been doing your presentations now for what, 6 years now, going on 7 years, I think, or something like that.
Yeah,
I
that's
mean,
our seventh.
yeah, and what's the one big lesson, if there is, like Pablo's Hippos will be a lesson Colombia is going to have to learn the hard way. Once again, is that you cannot allow this kind of stuff to happen. But for you, let's with you. What's the one big lesson everybody needs to learn, even 30 years later, about Pablo Escobar, the Hippos, everything else? If there was a key lesson in history, what is it? Because you were saying it's a history lesson.
Well, for me, it's we want the world to know the truth, because there's so many others out there speaking about it that are not speaking the truth. They're speaking theories. They're speaking, trying to change the legacy of a family member, that type thing. What we've learned is there's still a massive interest in it from around the world. We get messages weekly from people around the world. When are you going to bring the show here? When are you going to come back to the UK? Which we love doing that, but the whole purpose of doing that is to tell the truth. And the other thing is, part of that truth is we want the world to know who the true heroes are. And Javi and I, we mention this in every interview we do, in every presentation we do on stage. Whatever opportunity we have is to discuss who the true heroes are from that entire investigation down there at Manhunt. Because here in the United States, people will meet us, especially when we do interviews, and they're like, "You guys are true American heroes." No, we're not. We were a couple of professional law enforcement officers who got to work a really big case that eventually got blown out of proportion by the Netflix series Narcos. But what we want the world to know is who the real heroes are, and that's the Colombian National Police, because they fight. They died, over 1,000 police officers killed in this in one investigation, and they took their country back from this guy. That's the thing I want everybody to remember. That's the takeaway I want you to remember from this.
Yeah.
JP?
Yep. And as for me, you know what? The hippos, it's not their problem. They're animals. They're living. They're vegetating. They're reproducing. It was who brought them there? Pablo Escobar. And now they're a problem. And you know what? The country of Colombia has to find solutions to this problem. We all respect animals. They're they're living. They're doing what hippos are doing. They were brought by Pablo Escobar, and no one. I hate to say it, nobody tried to solve the situation, and now we'll look at what they're in for right now.
You know what? And when we talk about Pablo, he was the world's first narco terrorist. And people say, what's a narco terrorist? Well, it's basically a narcotics trafficker that employs terroristic activities in his criminal activities, right? So that's pretty simple. Well, now he gets a new title. Now he's an eco terrorist
He's an
because
eco
of what he's
terrorist,
doing to
yeah.
the ecological system in that part of Colombia.
And you know what? I have a prediction is that They will not solve this, and unfortunately, it will be one of those things. Nature will have to figure out how to do this because I doubt governments can figure out an effective way to take care of this. So there
Yeah.
we are. So let's bring this episode to an end. So again, I get to turn the tables, get to interview JP and Murph, and yes, we will all be together. This is going to come out on a Monday. This will come out on Monday. What is it? The 23rd. And then the following week, we are all going to be together for at least a couple, 3 days down in San Diego at the Southern California Game Conference, politicians conference, where we will be collecting more stories. And maybe we will get, maybe there won't be Pablo's Hippos, but maybe it'll be Steve's turtles, Steve's alligators. We want to hear about the alligators, And JP, we don't know what it is, but it involves aguardiente. So whatever it is.
Hey, I just want to say it's a real honor and pleasure to have Javier back on the show with us.
Thank you, guys.
He helped us get this kicked off, and here we are almost a year later.
It's been fun, guys.
Glad to have you back, brother.
And we'll see
and if
each
you guys
other in a
want to
couple
hear the
weeks.
real, and if you guys want to hear the real in-depth story, guess what? Time to pimp it out. Patreon.com/Game of Crimes, The Real DEA Narcos, talking about the real DEA Narcos, 12 episodes where we provide the most in-depth analysis of the capture and the manhunt, capture, and killing of Pablo Escobar, including Javier sleeping in Pablo's bed at La Catedral, staring at the ceiling, wondering, I wonder what kind of sex room is in La Catedral.
Why isn't there a sex wing here? There was one at his ranch.
And on that note, everybody stay tuned for the debrief.
Thanks, everyone.